Chapter 70, Sunset Mountain Range, 7, Not Fair. Nangong Liuyun's red lips raised slightly into a nefariously charming smile. His pair of star-shaped eyes contained an intense killing intent, as he stared at her scornfully with icy cold eyes. Fair? What kind of thing is that? He doted on little Luo Luo because she will be a part of his family. Who needed others to make thoughtless remarks? Was it because these people were tired of living? Lu Weiming threw at Lu Ruohua a harsh glare and said in a stern voice. What nonsense are you saying? If it weren't for His Highness Prince Jin lending a hand, we would have already been completely wiped out. You still think that you can take the spoils of war for free? Su Luo secretly pondered, this Lu Weiming was actually not so foolish. He was able to judge the hour and size up the situation. Also his words left some leeway. If he didn't think of taking it for free, then was he going to use some means to exchange for it? Su Luo was shaking the inner core inside the jade box, with a smile yet not a smiling expression that contained some self-evident meaning. Lu Weiming with a cajoling smile, asked. Miss Su, this inner core is something that we have a reason to acquire and must insist on obtaining it. I don't know if you would be willing to be parted from it. However, before even waiting for Su Luo to reply, Nangong Luyun directly seized the jade box. Then he picked up the sparkling and translucent inner core that could shone through flesh or bones and placed it into his mouth. Ha! At that moment, everybody was unable to make sense of what they were seeing and also, what was the intent behind His Highness Prince Jin's act. However, in the next moment, Nangong Liuyun's unyieldingly powerful palm took hold of the back of Su Luo's head. His other hand was wrapped around her slender waist. A dense and heavy shadow started to loom ever closer to Su Luo. Oh, in the next instant Su Luo was being kissed, the type that was like an electric shock that rendered her limp and numbed her limbs when it swept through her entire body. The kiss had come too suddenly, it also seemed to have been timed perfectly. The surrounding area had become silent with only the gentle sound of the wind. Only the roars of dragons and whistles of the tigers sounded from afar, could be heard. Lu Ruohua had almost chewed her lips to a pulp. Li Wan's meaningful glare was about to bore a hole through Su Luo. With His Highness Prince Jin, how could this be possible? His Highness Prince Jin was a matchless noble existence, he was likened to the gods of heaven in their 9-pagoda palace. How could Su Luo this slut, be worthy of him? Everyone had their eyes opened wide in disbelief. Yet at this moment, Nangong Luyun was kissing Su Luo with reverence and was dragging it on lingeringly, unruffled by their sentiment. Thus the inner core of the wild serpent was delivered directly into Su Luo's mouth. Su Luo was choking on it and she started to cough, in a panic she pushed Nangong Luyun away. Nangong Luyun did not try to prevent her from doing it, he only heartwarmingly and tenderly watched the slightly panicked Su Luo. His mouth had hooked into a smug and toying with someone for amusement kind of smiling expression. His star-shaped eyes, below his sword-like eyebrows held a devilish enchanting charm and seemed to be covered with a layer of haze. It was hard to make out, but it was still glistening and dazzling in a way that brightens up a room. Su Luo very fiercely glared at Nangong Luyun, but those eyes gave off a beautiful mist, making people who see them founding it to be clever, and to give them a special feeling. Nangong Liuyun's wicked hand stroked toward the side of his own lips, wishing to use his fingers to continue caressing her abdomen. Su Luo had lifted her skirt and heavily stepped on his foot. Nangong Luyun was loudly begging for mercy. His face brimming with a resplendent and careless smile. His bright and clear laughter was echoing around. Su Luo heard his laugh and was even more humiliated into anger. Luo girl, this time you are mistaken about this king's action. Nangong Luyun immediately lifted up his hands in surrender, showing off his obedience and said. The wild serpent's inner core's poisonous nature is extremely fierce, only by using this method will you be prevented from being harmed by it. It seemed somewhat reasonable, Su Luo's beautiful eyes was moving around. She menacingly arched her eyebrows. This time I'll let you go. Next time I'll pay more attention and take note of it. Between the two of them, they seemed to be at swords drawn and bows bent. However, in another's eyes it seemed as if they were having a flirtatious exchange. This scene was extremely ambiguous. Lu Weiming with an extremely disappointed look gazed at Su Luo. The inner core was already swallowed by her, it could never be taken back. In fact, how could he have known that Nangong Luyun since the beginning had calculated and planned for getting his hand on the wild serpent's inner core? Otherwise, with regards to his personality, why would he have let those people follow behind him? So till the end, no matter what, this inner core would eventually be delivered into Su Luo's mouth. Just at this time, from the distant horizon, waves of melodious heavenly music could be heard. Chapter 71, A Pair of Jade Annulus. 1. Around a dozen or so maidens with lily-white hands like the long and delicate lotus roots were holding baskets full of blooming flowers. They were divided into 2 rows and were quickly treading towards them in the air. A rush of wind, like the clear sound of moving water, brushed by. Swathes of captivating red cherry blossoms floated down like a snowfall being carried by a breeze. Fluttering about and sprinkling behind sparkling and translucent snow-like petals. This scene was exceptionally beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Every one of them was clothed in a white silken dress, with straight and proper postures. Although their individual features were by no means considered beautiful, each and every one of them was slender, simple, and neat. Too elegant and exquisite to be from this earth, their entire bodies seemed not to have been touched even a little by the vulgarness of the mortal world. They seemed like immortal beings flying by in a realm high above the common populace. Their 10 fingers were slender, their waists were slim, and their footsteps were lithe and lively like an approaching wave of ageless fairies. They also looked like elfin spirits who just started to dance so beautifully that they could mesmerize one to the point of not being able to turn away. In their midst, there was a flowery litter so refined and lavish that it would stifle people into silence. It was carried by 4 maidens in a nimble and lively manner. In almost no time, this flowery litter gently landed. It steadily and securely halted in front of Nangong Luyun. Such a grand show gave off an imposing loftiness that was the mark of high status. Who knew which divine place was the person in the flowery litter from? Su Luo's heart was secretly curious. She lifted her eyebrows and looked at Nangong Luyun. She saw the corner of his mouth at this moment started to raise slightly. Inside that smile contained a gorgeous resplendent brilliance, as if the corner of his eyes and the tip of his eyebrows were both carrying a smiling expression. Su Luo could say with certainty that this person was Nangong Luyun's old acquaintance. Moreover, he was very happy to see this person. Su Luo's eyes faintly narrowed, but her face remained calm and collected. As time passed in her heart, she became even more interested in the person in the flowery litter. The flowery litter halted and was lowered. A slender, fair hand lifted itself to part the hanging curtain of green jade beads that surrounded the litter. From the interior, a fairy-like girl in the prime of her youth unhurriedly strolled out. One could only see her body, clothed in white that was as pure and holy as snow. Her dress stood against the wind with the skirt flying naturally like a winter snow fairy that drifted above the mundane world of man. Also there were splendid lights that radiated from her, its brilliance could blind someone. Her long hair dangled down to her ankles. The fine black hair danced carelessly along with the breeze, similar to an immortal fairy on the verge of leaving with the wind. She rode the wind evanescently, like a dying firework slowly fading into nothingness. Her eyelashes were just like butterfly wings, sweeping up and down while painted in a thick and rich black color. Her eyes resemble misty water droplets and maintained an unmatched grace and peacefulness. Her neck was delicate and graceful, her skin like crystallized amber with ice-colored flesh and bones formed from jade. This was a woman at the pinnacle of feminine beauty, as if she was a beautiful spirit emerging from an orchid hidden away in an empty valley. It was as if thousands of living things collected their best features and integrated into her entire body, in an attempt to shame the people in front of her, into feeling the helpless nature of their inferiority. Currently, she stood filling the surrounding with her presence. Her lips were like a puckered red cinnabar, with a simple and neat complexion that displayed such a rare beauty. As she silently watched Nangong Luoyun, she seemed to be holding in a thread of light laughter. Her eyes seemed to be apathetic and alienating, but they were also covered in a layer of watery mist. Behind the watery mist was an expression full of tender-hearted feelings. Nangong Luoyun's always chilly and cruel icy eyes appeared to have become like a thin seam that cracked open. His beautiful eyes were pitch black as ink and serene. With its hidden depth that held his source of demonic charm, his smile widened with an overflowing exuberance. He treated her very familiarly and also seemed to hold her very close and dear, completely different from the approach he used on Su Luo. "Why did you come?" Nangong Luoyun's snowy eyes appeared to show a slight concern. "Didn't you also come?" Her smile was very pretty. Her butterfly wing-like eyelashes gently blinked, sweeping up and down. Her beautiful eyes were hazy like watery mist, I could still see the pity. The two of them laughed and spoke quietly as if in their own world and other people were just superfluous. Lu Ruohua stood by Su Luo's side, now the sneer on her face was very much oblivious. She attempted to cruelly taunt Su Luo. "You really think that His Highness Prince Jin will like you? Did you not examine whether you match up to him?" Su Luo's dark black eyes under the sunlight illuminated a clear reflection of cold, gorgeous color and luster. She threw a quick glance at her with a smile that was not a smiling expression. The result of meddling in other people's business wouldn't be very wonderful. While speaking, her line of sight landed on Lu Ruohua's right hand that was cut off at the wrist and wrapped up in gauze. The depth of Lu Ruohua's eyes was full of a vicious hatred. But soon, she gave a cold and dark laugh. "Don't you see? The two of them are a true match, made by heaven and arranged on earth, one. You are merely the mud under the soles of his feet. Not even worthy to lift His Highness Prince Jin's shoes. One, made by heaven and arranged by earth, Chinese idiom meaning, ideal and perfect match made in heaven or made for one another." Chapter 72, A Pair of Jade Annulus, 2, Really? Su Luo lazily smiled. When had the words, "I like the godlike, noble Prince Jin" described by them, ever come out of her mouth? Boring commoners were always so laughable. Despite the notion that you don't care about something, others seem to stubbornly insisted that you do. What's more, at the same time, they tried to deride you for not caring. Open your eyes and look closely. That person is the Jade Lake Palace's young princess. People call her Jade Lake's fairy. Regardless of whether it's innate talent, accomplishments in martial arts, or even family background, none of it is something you a good-for-nothing can compare. You still don't get it right? In everyone's eyes those two were made for one another like a pair of jade annulus. There won't exist a even more suited pair than them. Lu Ruohua's eyes were filled to the brim with maliciousness and a mocking disdain that seemed to take joy in calamity and delight in disaster. 1. If she couldn't be with him, then Su Luo, this lump of mud, even more shouldn't think about it. Really? Su Luo's expression was indifferent, apparently unconcerned. She nonchalantly seized up the immortal fairy not far from her. This was the most suitable companion in the legendary rumor. They stood facing each other, and it seemed like a painter's masterpiece of being in love and inseparable in the human world inked on a picture scroll. Nangong Luoyun's phoenix eyes were narrowed, his features were picturesque with red alluring lips. A head of fine, jet-black hair poured down in torrents. A faint, flirtatiously fiendish charm exuded from his entire persons, which was currently giving off a very languid air. Clothed in a dark, mysterious robe traced with hidden patterns of bright embroidery. The hem of his brocade robe was lifted gently by gusts of wind. It was elegantly and gracefully dancing in the breeze like a brightly colored butterfly. The Jade Lake Fairy's features were fine and slender like sculpted gems. Her lips were a frosty cherry color and emitted a bright, glossy sheen. Her neck was delicate and graceful. Her skin was like ice that glowed with the luster of gems. Dressed in an snow-white, inviting skirt, she gave the appearance of a simple and elegant immortal with a manner that was exceedingly untouched and above the common people. One individual was handsome and outstandingly talented. The other individual was devastatingly beautiful, capable of causing the downfall of a city or state. One was devilish charming and the other rose from the perfection of nature. Although Lu Ruohua was annoying, but her words were not false. Nangong Luyun and the Jade Lake Fairy were indeed the perfect match, like a pair of jade annulus made by heaven and arranged by earth, too. Su Luo folded both her arms and narrowed her beautiful eyes slightly. Just in this way, she unconcernedly stood in her original place for a long time, motionless while quietly watching them. Currently, it seemed as if suddenly Nangong Luyun just thought of something. He glanced back and beckoned to Su Luo. However, Su Luo only raised her dainty, slender eyebrows, returning his look with a smile that was not a smile. What was the meaning of this? Does he think that merely by summoning her with just a wave, that she would just go to him? Was she, Su Luo, in his eyes just so contemptible? That Jade Lake's holy maiden laughingly looked over. Her shapely eyebrows resembled crescent moons. The black painted eyebrows against the backdrop of her white powdered face, gave off a gem-like luster of someone inseparably in love. Her shoulder seemed to be carved like a sculpture with a naturally balanced waist. Her flesh was glowing like crystallized amber and had a serene presence like that of a secluded orchid. A pair of limpidly bright and intelligent eyes watched Su Luo. It was so beautiful that it was practically earth-shaking and made people suffocate. It made people feel inferior such that they were unable to bear it, thus lowering their head in terror. The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose slightly in welcome and betrayed not a bit of weakness in any regard. A pair of beautiful pure and deep eyes was so clear as to be moving, as if it can see through everything. Considering her imposing manner, why would Su Luo, who walk out from the middle of foul wind and bloody rain, for more than 10 years be afraid of her? The two of them silently looked eye to eye. For a while, the surrounding area was quiet, and the spectacle seemed to hold a little awkwardness. However, just at this time, an unforeseen event was suddenly born. Suddenly from the depths of the mountain range came an extremely sharp burst of chirping. As this sound pierced through the sky, it resembled gold grinding on stone. To hear it made people's eardrums sting with extreme pain. A buzzing sound echoed through the area. Their heartbeats throbbed violently with the blood vessels bursting open so energetically that it caused people to almost faint. At this moment, everyone was shocked. Everyone all looked toward the direction where the sound came from. In the distance a mysterious force seemed to circulate. The earth and sky radiated with brilliance. All of a sudden a flaming red-colored lightning streaked across the horizon, and the flash quickly passed. Afterwards, vast stretches of flame soared like a raging blaze emitting resplendent light. It was as if it desired to envelope chunks of the entire sky and burn them fiercely. Phoenix. Fire Phoenix. Nobody knew who pointed to the horizon at the brutal image that quickly flashed by, while excitedly shrieking loudly. Dragon. There is also a divine dragon. Again someone else immediately followed with an excited shout. Chapter 73, A Pair of Jade Annulus, 3, Both the Phoenix and Dragon race had almost all but disappeared on this continent. Who would have thought that their silhouettes would actually simultaneously appear today? The so-called dragon that Su Luo had to kill was only an armored-back dragon. That kind of dragon and this divine dragon of legend were fundamentally two different concepts. The appearance of the phoenix and divine dragon excited everyone greatly, but their current situation was extremely unfavorable. This was because the bloody battle being carried out by the two divine beasts was causing trouble for the magical beasts in the Sunset Mountain range below them. At this moment, almost all the magical beasts were wildly dashing outwards in order to avoid any troublesome accidental encounter and attempting to keep away from the two divine beasts locked in battle. Currently, there were countless number of magical beasts violently charged towards them at full speed like the tide. It was aggressive and impossible to block. This situation isn't good. Nangong Liuyan's tempting purple eyes held a dense coldness. Indeed, a wave of magical beasts is coming. Jade Lake's holy maiden answered indifferently. A wave of magical beasts. The expressions on each and every other person's had changed greatly, and their eyes were filled with terror. Even though they had never experienced a magical beast stampede, they had already been warned by their teachers about how terrifying it was. Whenever a magical beast wave appeared, martial artists at the scene would almost always barely escape, but at the same time, this fortuitous encounter was an occurrence that happened once in a century. Because whenever a magical beast wave happened, a peerless treasure would always inevitably appear. It was extremely possible that what those two almost extinct divine beasts were fighting over was a heavenly treasure. At the center of the forest, the Jade Lake's holy maiden's beautiful eyes were indifferent as she suddenly turned her head. She wished to continue talking, but then stopped. She tilted her head as her beautiful eyes exchanged meaningful looks with Nangong Liuyan. Nangong Liuyan's charming eyes looked at Su Luo, and the bright radiance in the depths of his eyes dimmed for a split second. Every time a magical beast wave occurred, although it was dangerous, it was still a rare, hard-to-come-by opportunity. If it was in the past, he would naturally go onwards and explore. However, the one next to him was Su Luo, who had no spiritual power. He could guarantee his own safety if he had to withdraw, but he could not say that she would certainly come out unscathed. Su Luo had on a completely carefree expression. With her clear eyes that could vividly see everything, she casually glanced at him. "You can go, don't worry about me." After saying that, a trace of loneliness suddenly flashed through her heart. Even though Lu Ruohua was hateful, what she had said was right. With her current strength, she didn't even have the qualification to stand by his side. He and the Jade Lake's holy maiden were the ones in their own world. Their strengths were appropriately equivalent and their identities were compatible. And she seemed to be in disregarded tiny insignificant existence that could only look up towards them from an extremely low point of view in their presence. This kind of feeling was extremely unpleasant. A trace of sympathy flashed through Nangong Liuyan's clear and intelligent eyes. He rubbed her little head. "How can I not care about you? What nonsense." After finished speaking, he turned his head and smiled towards the Jade Lake's holy maiden. "Be careful. No matter what, a mere treasure is not as important as your life." He said it in a warm and gentle tone of voice, completely unlike the ice-cold cruel way he uses with others. "Thank you for the warning." Jade Lake's holy maiden's pure eyes were touching and her faint laugh was like a cool breeze gently passing by, without any startling ripples or extremely varying emotions. As light as water, her gaze gently landed on Su Luo's face, yet a terrifying piercing cold feeling suddenly went down Su Luo's back. Is this woman, really as she's portrayed herself, like lifeless water? Without sorrow or joy, and free from mortal vulgarity? A hint of suspicion flashed through the depths of Su Luo's heart as her heart sensed a sort of bad premonition. Su Luo did not dare to say that her sixth sense was infallible, but it had never been wrong for all these years. Chapter 74, To Subdue a Foolish, Adorable, Pampered Spirit. 1. Countless magical beasts rushed toward them in a violent surge with an imposing manner and a scathing murderous killing intent. 2 feet simply could not hope to outrun 4-legged magical beasts, and even if they managed to outrun it also doesn't necessarily mean they would come out unscathed. The depths of Nangong Liuyan's eyes contained a thick chill. He picked up Su Luo and whirled his body around, flying towards the nearby small wooden house on top of a tree. Lu Ruohua and her companions imitated Nangong Liuyan one after another. Every one of them used both their hands and feet together to quickly climb up the millennium-old ancient trees. They tightly hugged the tree branches, hoping that they could escape this wave of magical beasts. Jade Lake's fairy turned her body around and looked toward Nangong Luoyun with a detached expression. She saw his silhouette carrying Su Luo in his arms. Her elegant and vibrantly beautiful eyes seemed to be covered in a layer of watery mist. Nobody understood the meaning hidden in the depth of her eyes that were as pitch black as ink. Her face lacked expression, and her red lips slightly opened into an arc, evoking a trace of an impassive smile. Her jade arms clenched at her thin, misty green, full-length, muslin gown that swept the floor as if it was leaving behind a trail of running water. Immediately, the light muslin danced in the breeze like fireworks that become faintly discernible before fading into nothingness. The Jade Lake's fairy whirled and immediately flew away in a graceful and naturally relaxed manner. Around a dozen maidservants by her side were shrouded in icy-cold expressions as they coldly launched their gazes at Su Luo. Soon after, they too, followed her and flew away. Su Luo's thin eyebrows hesitantly knitted. Her intuition told her that this Jade Lake's fairy smile was somewhat mysterious. Sure enough, just when she had flown a short distance away, numerous vultures suddenly surrounded them in a circle. The Vulture King seemed to be fixated on the Jade Lake's fairy, and each maneuver was filled with malicious ruthlessness. The Vulture King was a 7th-ranked magical beast. It was also a flying-type magical beast. Compared to similarly ranked land-type magical beast, it was even more difficult to handle. At this time, Jade Lake's fairy's circumstances appeared to be extremely dangerous. The Vulture King was in hot pursuit of the Jade Lake's fairy, as it followed tightly behind her. It seemed that the Jade Lake's fairy was about to lose her life under the sharp claws of the Vulture King. Nangong Luoyun's star-shaped eyes held a complicated light, and his expression fluctuated between brightness and darkness, while being profoundly mysterious. Suddenly, he hugged Su Luo to him, and left a passionate kiss on her bright and clean jade-like forehead. His serious expression condensed into an austere stare directed toward Su Luo. "Be good. Just stay here and wait for me. Don't go anywhere else." Before the words completely left his mouth, and without waiting for Su Luo's reply, his body had already elevated to midair. Fast as lightning, he rushed toward the place where the Jade Lake's fairy was. "Nangong Luoyun, you keep on saying that you like me, but when all's said and done, in your heart she is still more important." The corner of Su Luo's mouth rose into a faint and bitter laugh such that even she did not realize. A poignant and acerbic meaning was mixed within her bitter laughter. Now Su Luo finally understood why the Jade Lake's fairy was smiling before with such a hidden meaning. This woman, her appearance and martial arts, were both viewed as at the top. In addition, her sophisticated shrewdness and scheming was also very deep. And on top of that her extraordinary family background. Gods were truly generous in their treatment of her, providing her with a gifted advantage. As expected, this kind of talented person was really Nangong Luoyun's perfect match. How could she, Su Luo, the unfavored, good-for-nothing, common woman from a great general's manor be considered as something? Su Luo coldly smiled, set aside all her negative mood and started to size up the small tree house. The small tree house was very clean, roughly about 10 square meters of space. Inside the tree house, besides the woven mat spread on the floor, there was nothing else. Su Luo motionlessly and quietly sat in the small tree house. Perhaps it was because of the loneliness of a person being isolated in the way she was, but Su Luo's thoughts had a strong feeling of disappointment. In her previous life, she had been a renowned assassin, who was the cause of the sentencing and the obliteration of numerous people. The vast majority of the people were just a mark to her. But ever since having arrived in this world, she frequently felt as though she was being thwarted by the gods. Here she was, only a member of the ordinary people. She could rely on her previous incarnation's skills to defeat a first-ranked Su Wan. However, if she were to genuinely battle it out with the second-ranked Su Shi, she may not necessarily be able to win. Chapter 75, To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit, 2, let alone daring to challenge someone as strong as the Jade Lake's fairy. Yes, the Jade Lake's fairy continuously smiled at her, with an ordinary expression which lacked emotions. But from within her smile, Su Luo could clearly read her state of mind, and it showed a kind of disdain. She had exuded an air of contempt. As if to say, just by a slight move of her finger, she could squish Su Luo like a bug. This type of impression made Su Luo feel extremely out of sorts. Within her heart a raging fighting spirit had been ignited. She, Su Luo, was not a good-for-nothing. On the contrary, she was a super-gifted genius with an affiliation for 3 elemental systems. If she was only given a chance, her future accomplishments would not be any bit inferior to others. Su Luo made a fist. This time, she must find dragon's blood in order to open up her space element. This way, her wood and fire dual systems wouldn't be firmly suppressed, giving her the opportunity to start cultivating. Otherwise, no matter how great her innate talent, it would still be useless. The person she was right now could be considered the richest individual under the heavens. There were mountains of gold and silver within her grasp, but, up until now, she couldn't find the keys to open the door. She could only gaze at the ocean and lament her inadequacy, from outside the door. Time passed slowly, bit by bit. However, Nangong Luyun hadn't returned yet. She was not sure what had happened, because all of the magical beasts had run away. For at this time, the surroundings were very still and quiet. The stillness was strangely eerie, like the calm before the storm. Suddenly, the storm winds began to rise. The powerful gale whistled and screamed with blasts that made the entire earth tremble. The small tree house swayed and tottered in the wind's midst. Su Luo leaned forward and looked out the window. Laid before her was the scene of a tornado as black as ink, moving rapidly while roaring towards her exact location. It was similar to a giant creature that extended its bloody mouth wide open like a sacrificial bull, too, with thunderous snarls, while baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. 3. It was as if both heaven and earth allowed it to do whatever it pleases. Nobody could possibly prevent it. The tornado came hurtling past. The small wooden house teetered on the verge of collapse. In order to not be blown away flying, Su Luo tightly clutched a pillar. Suddenly, Su Luo became aware that under her foot she sensed bouts of earth quaking and the mountains shaking. 4. She looked out the tiny window and couldn't help be somewhat flabbergasted. She discovered that her entire person, it should be more accurate to say the entire small tree house, had actually been lifted from the ground. Very quickly, the small tree house broke away from the 1,000-year-old ancient tree trunk. It was uprooted and the tornado swept it up into midair. However, it could be deemed fortunate that the small tree house hasn't collapsed and fallen apart, rather it still stood firmly. But still, Su Luo's complexion had turned somewhat pale. She visually estimated that her current distance from the ground was roughly about 100 meters. If she was to fall from such a height, she would become nothing but torn body and crushed bones. 5, not even crumbs would remain. She had yet to cultivate flying techniques. If she fell down, then there was only one word: death. Su Luo aggravatedly scratched her head. That damned Nangong Luyun. He only knew how to be concerned about the Jade Lake's fairy, while leaving her as he pleased in a random spot at the original place. And also that damn tornado. Why sweep up the small wooden house where she was? Obviously there were still other small tree houses over there. Like this, she could also be chosen. In the end, what kind of luck was this? Su Luo was hit by a moment of extreme speechlessness. The surrounding gale of the tornado rages on, however in the eyes of the tornado the breeze was still, and waves were quiet. 6. At present, Su Luo sat in the faintly fluttering small tree house, just as if she was sitting in a hot air balloon. Now if someone was to see this, they would certainly be stupefied such that their chin would drop to the ground. Because the people of this world had never seen a house flying in the sky. Could this be considered the first time since the beginning of history? Just when Su Luo had become all too nervous, suddenly, a tiny spherical body was thrown into the small wooden house. It tumbled to the floor and rolled about until it finally stopped by Su Luo's feet. This spherical object. Su Luo meticulously looked it up and down. In her heart a trace of misgivings flashed through. It looked like a type of egg, moreover it was a very large egg. Could it be that even flying in the sky, she could still pick up an egg? Was it possible for the mother bird to be flying and laying an egg at the same time? At that moment, 3 black lines appeared on Su Luo's forehead. 1. Gaze at the ocean and lament her inadequacy, idiom, to feel powerless and incompetent, to perform a task. 2. Bloody mouth wide open like a sacrificial bowl, idiom, ferocious mouth of beast of prey, greedy exploiter, rapacious aggressor. 3. Baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, idiom, to make threatening gestures. 4. Earthquaking and the mountains shaking, could also mean, tremendous battle. 5. Torn body and crushed bones, figuratively meaning to die horribly, to sacrifice one's life. 6. Breeze was still, and waves were quiet, idiom, tranquil environment, all is quiet, a dead calm, at sea. Chapter 76, To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 3. She pulled back her train of thought that was indulging in flights of fancy. 1. Su Luo's attention was, without exception, completely concentrated upon the egg. This egg was no less than the size of a soccer ball. The outer shell was white and glossy with colored rays of light like the luster of gems shining through. Occasionally a stream of light would also streak across the top. It gave off a dense and mysterious air. Suddenly, rustling noises could be heard from inside the egg, as if the small creature within was trying to break out of its shell and enter the world. Su Luo was immediately struck dumb. Impossible, right? How could this egg, against all expectations, just happen to hatch out of the blue like this in the sky? However, as if in response to her amazement, the top of the egg promptly split open and a thin crack appeared on the surface. Afterwards, the crack became wider and wider until crisp bump, bump, bump noises could be heard. Su Luo held her breath in rapt attention, her eyes opened wide while watching the spectacle before her. She saw, from the fragmented pieces of eggshell on the topmost part of the egg, a tiny head covered with some shattered pieces of eggshells, slowly but surely make its way out. It naively, adorably, and unsteadily, rotated its tiny head. What kind of creature is this? Su Luo had never seen one like it before. But this little thing looked too adorable. A round puffy little head, simple and strong, that was absolutely adorable. Both of its eyes were closed tightly like a newborn, the corner of its mouth was dribbling out a lot of tiny little bubbles. It seemed somewhat dejected because, apart from its head, the rest of its body was still in the eggshell. She could only see its eyes were still closed. It had a rosy red moist little mouth which was very small, but its nibbling speed was very fast. The little thing looked like it was nibbling on a large piece of round bread. It first nibbled away at the eggshell near its mouth, then slowly extended to the surrounding area. It finally finished eating the entire eggshell, then used its nose to sniff around as if looking for something else. Throughout the entire process, its eyes remained closed, giving it a charmingly innocent impression. Su Luo's heart became curious. What is this little thing that just broke through its eggshell looking for? In the midst of her curious musings, the little thing took some shaky steps with its thin, delicate legs, and swayed drunkenly about, tottered to the side of Su Luo's feet. It extended 2 small paws and grabbed the lower corner of Su Luo's clothing. Its small body trembled and quivered while climbing into her lap. The whole time, Su Luo's body was completely stiff. She stared at this little guy with an extremely dumbfounded expression. At the moment, this little guy's plump and chubby little body was already laying on its back in her lap. Its little belly moved up and down with every breath, eyes still closed as it started to make tiny snoring noises. Its pair of paws still firmly clasped a piece of Su Luo's clothing. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't pry its paws open. This little guy was a little too unself-conscious. Wasn't approaching her out of its own accord already acting a little too familiar? Does it think that she is its mother? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 strips of black lines appeared on Su Luo's forehead. Drip, drip, drip. Her cold sweat poured down. Her eyes were fixed on this little guy that trustingly came of its own accord. She meticulously and carefully looked at it up and down. Speaking of which, what kind of species is this little guy? Say, is it a dog? It looks a little like it could be, but it didn't have fur. Say, is it a baby dragon? However, it was born to look like a plump ball with a foolish, blank expression that was too adorable. Entirely unlike the image of a divine dragon that would bear fangs and brandish claws, too, with a terrible and fierce malevolence. The most important thing is this, that egg just now, how did it roll to here in the first place? Was it caused by man or was it the will of heaven? Also, her small wooden house, how did it remain intact when it was in the middle of a roaring tornado? This was simply too unbelievable. In the midst of Su Luo's contemplation, the small wooden house suddenly began to tremble. She was shaken until the sky spun and the earth went around. 3. Her head was woozy and her vision was spinning, making her dizzy. Finally, she felt the entire small wooden house fall straight down. Oh damn it! Su Luo secretly cursed in her heart as she firmly held on to the small wooden house. Next to her ear, the wind whistled loudly. Right now the situation was even more terrifying than being in a falling elevator. It was through great difficulty that she, Su Luo, had once again been reborn. How could she fall and die again, in this era? 1. Indulging in flights of fancy, Chinese idiom, to let one's imagination run wild, to have a bee in one's bonnet, unrealistic utopian fantasy. 2. Bare fangs and brandish claws, Chinese idiom, to make threatening gestures. 3. Sky spins and the earth goes around, Chinese idiom, giddy with one's head spinning, figuratively meaning huge changes in the world. Chapter 77, to subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 4. When the small wooden house fell down, it fortunately by chance, smashed down onto the branches of another 1,000-year-old ancient tree. Lush branches continuously resisted the downward pressure of the fall. During the descent, although the small wooden house was thrown about until it shattered into tiny pieces, Su Luo, a step ahead, had already rolled out of it hugging the little guy tightly. Su Luo's movements were very nimble. She tucked the defenseless little guy next to her bosom, used both hands to grab a tree branch, and light as a feather, floated past. Her movements were graceful, lithe and agile. Because of her ability to quickly dodge, when the shattered pieces of wood from the little wooden house fell down, it was unable to cause her the slightest bit of harm. However, this did not mean she was safe yet. Quite the opposite, there were other dangers that awaited her. Currently, not far from Su Luo's location, there was an extremely bitter battle taking place. One was a creature that looked very similar to the little guy, the divine dragon that Lu Ruohua and company previously shouted about. As for the other one, it could only be the phoenix bird, burning from head to foot in a raging inferno of flames. The two were fighting against each other to the point where it seemed that both sides would suffer from this winless situation. Dragon? Suddenly a thought flashed through Su Luo's mind. Her brain suddenly light up, she ruefully hit herself in the head. She had suffered untold hardships. 1. To arrive at the Sunset Mountain Range, eliminated countless difficulties, and all for what? It was, of course, for dragon blood. Since the one that was just fighting was a dragon, then. Su Luo's gaze landed on the charmingly naive little guy who was comfortably asleep in her arms. This guy should also be a dragon, right? That's right. There could be no mistake. This was definitely a dragon. From before, that soccer ball-sized egg was absolutely a dragon egg. While she can't get the divine dragon's blood, but this little divine dragon was currently in her hands. Hey, hey. The corner of Su Luo's mouth brought forth a sinister smile. This was indeed a perversion of searching everywhere, far and wide, given how easy it was to find. She realized that her luck was so good that it could only be described as defying heaven's will. She never expected that a dragon's egg would just coincidentally be dropped in front of her. Moreover, it also spontaneously hatched. And what's more, it even reflexively volunteered to climb into her lap. Su Luo started to smile with pride. Her slender finger poked the little divine dragon in her arms. The corner of the little dragon's mouth began to froth and bubble as it sleepily wheezes and snored in a sound sleep. It was completely unaware that it was being marked by someone. If the mother dragon knew about Su Luo's thoughts, it really would want to vomit blood. Just when her little dragon, that she had nurtured with great difficulty, was about to hatch, she ran into a phoenix that was seeking revenge. She could do nothing, and had no other choice than to randomly select a tiny place to store her little dragon egg. But how could she have known that the random small wooden house she had selected was actually harboring such a person? Furthermore, by sheer chance, what the person needed most was dragon's blood. If the mother dragon knew of this, it very likely would become insane with anger. What was this called? This was practically called voluntarily delivering her child to the door of a tyrant and begging for it to be oppressed. Su Luo took out a dagger from within her boots, which glittered like frost and snow, radiating deathly cold rays of light. However, right when Su Luo was pondering where she ought to start cutting, the little divine dragon unexpectedly woke up. It opened its misty, watery little eyes, and its little paws started to rub the blurred drowsiness out of them. Its little face was filled with confusion. This stupidly cute expression seemed to be able to enthrall any person with its adorable, bewitching sense of cuteness. Naturally, when she saw it, even Su Luo's iron-hard heart also softened. Suddenly, the adorable little dragon opened its round eyes wide and instantly fixed its gaze onto Su Luo. Su Luo also silently gazed back at it. When it saw Su Luo, the little divine dragon seemed to become very excited. Its little mouth opened, issuing forth a sweet-sounding dragon cry. Wang, the dragon cry rang out next to Su Luo's ear, jolting her forehead with extreme pain and giving her a splitting headache. But also because of the sound of this dragon cry, her plans had been ruined. 1. Suffered untold hardships, Chinese idiom, trials and tribulations, with difficulty, after some effort. Chapter 78, To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 5. The mother dragon and the fire phoenix's fight was at the peak of ferocity for the battle, but it still found the time to turn its head. Only to see its treasured little baby was actually laying in the arms of a person from the insignificant human race. Moreover, that human was even wielding a dagger and making motions towards the baby with it. Oh, my God! The mother dragon let out an ear-piercing sound that resonated loud and clear. The sound volume blasted straight through the clouds into the sky. The mother dragon thought that it would be best to immediately release a dragon's breath to burn Su Luo to a crisp, until there would almost be nothing left. When the transformation to ashes was complete, the residual would float away light as a feather. However, Su Luo's good luck rested on the dragon hostage she held in her hands, as this placed her in an advantageous position. Therefore, none of the mother dragon's long-range attacks could be used. The mother dragon was afraid that while wounding the rat, it would hit the fragile jade vase. So, it refrained from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking vases. 1. Suddenly, Su Luo saw the enormously large body of a divine dragon leaped in her direction. Such an awe-inspiring, dignified, powerful dragon jolted her heart and caused it to throb violently. A startled expression passed through her eyes. It was too late to think clearly. She hugged the adorable little dragon close, turned around, and just ran. This was definitely an unconscious action. Run, run, run! Su Luo knew that if the mother dragon was to catch up to her, any hope of getting dragon's blood would be dashed. Not only that, her life would cease to exist beneath the flying claws of the violently raging mother dragon. The divine dragon's bursts of dragon roar shocked Su Luo, making her blood rush forth. The power of the dragon roar was deafening, like a magnificent army with thousands of men and horses, too, surging forward. While the divine dragon was chasing after Su Luo to kill her, the fire phoenix behind was also chasing after the divine dragon. It was also because of the fire phoenix's interference that Su Luo had a slight chance to escape. It appeared like a blazing path that pierced the vast sky. 10,000 thunderclaps started to echo across the sky, its power to destroy also contained an endless murderous intent. Su Luo while running also took the time to look back. She only saw the dragon's malevolently cruel and vengeful expression. The light of bloodlust shining out from the dragon's eyes. The soccer ball-sized scales glittered like snow and frost as if each piece contained an inexhaustible strength. Damn it, cursed Su Luo. Her expression changed slightly when she saw the distance between the divine dragon and herself shrinking. The divine dragon had long ago become enraged. If she was captured by it, then her end would absolutely be quite tragic. Su Luo accelerated her pace. Her footsteps seemed to give birth to the wind. With powerful jumps, she rushed forward without looking back. Su Luo's heart was very agitated. With her current speed, she was sure that halfway down the road, the dragon will overtake her. How can she escape from it? The divine dragon chased her until she had to go up to heaven or down to Hades, fleeing and still couldn't escape. In the meanwhile, the little guy in her arms was also restless. It apparently felt that they were playing a game. It stretched out its round, plump head and joined with its mother dragon in issuing dragon roars up here, down there, for. Su Luo was frustrated to death. She half threatened and half menacingly patted its head. Do not call out. The adorable little dragon did not seem to understand the meaning of Su Luo's words. Its round, circular eyes were full of confusion. However, after seeing Su Luo's cruel and sinister expression, it weakly withdrew its neck and silently contracted its little head back into Su Luo's arm. However, after a short while, the little dragon reverted to its old ways. The little head once again came out to explore. You're not allowed to yell, go back. Su Lu said while tapping its head. The little dragon once again did what it was told and very obediently pulled back into Su Luo's arms. As a result, every time the little dragon would spring out, Su Luo would flick it back in. It would come out to explore and then once again be bounced back in. Due to this back and forth, the adorable little dragon was under the impression that Su Luo was playing a game with it. Ha, 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 it laughingly chortled while playing along happily. Later on, Su Luo was too lazy to poke the little dragon, so it became upset. The little dragon started to wail a-woo loudly. An expression of being wronged appeared on its little face, its eyes were gleaming with tears. The 3 black lines on Su Luo's forehead once again appeared. All she wanted was a little dragon's blood. It should have been easy, right? In front she had an adorable little dragon stirring up trouble, behind she had a large divine dragon pursuing closely and unwilling to let go. The divine dragon's speed was like lightning. Wherever it goes all the grass and trees would fall to both sides, as if to open a path. 1. Refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking vases. Idiom, to not act against an evil so as to prevent harm to innocents. 2. Magnificent army with thousands of men and horses. Idiom, impressive display of manpower, all the king's horses and all the king's men. 3. Go up to heaven or down to Hades. Idiom, whichever way, I don't care, to decide to go ahead without foreboding. Chapter 79, To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 6. The rumbling echoes of tumbling rocks seemed to grow, and the trees that were blocking the path were immediately transformed into ashes by Dragon's breath. After a long chase it was still unable to catch up. The divine dragon was so infuriated, that both its eyes were red with anger. However, it was still afraid of injuring the little divine dragon, so it won't dare to fire off a dragon's breath. The large divine dragon's eyes continued to burn with flames of fury. The huge dragon tail resembled a chain of thickly linked iron swinging dangerously around. In one spot it had swept, it snapped all the forest trees within 10 meters of its body. Flying leaves swirled in the air as a giant cloud of dust rose. Although Su Luo was not swept up by the dragon tail, she was hit by flying fragments of wood. A piece of broken wood ruthlessly knocked against her back. When it did, Su Luo felt as if her back was about to split wide open. She felt as if a huge boulder had been pressing down on her chest, so heavily that made it nearly impossible for her to breathe. She felt that the qi and blood in her entire body rolled over in waves. A sweet coppery taste materialized in her throat. Unable to keep it in, she sprayed out a stream of blood. Fu, the soles of Su Luo's feet swayed, almost unable to stand. Just at this time, a sense of an impending crisis rushed through her mind. This was caused by the divine dragon behind her, who was unexpectedly preparing to unleash Dragon's breath. An awe-inspiring radiance streaked by, and the brilliant rays were like sharp swords launched toward Su Luo. Su Luo's complexion had immediately undergone a major change. She spared no effort. In rushing towards the tilting thorns, her speed was so quick that only an incomplete shadow was left behind. That slash of intense radiance was like the tip of a double-edged sword, that directly turned the trees within 100 meters ahead of it into ashes. Even the ground was completely split open, leaving a terrifying large fissure in the earth. The soil and mud were also turned into fine dust. Su Luo dangerously avoided this killing move. Yet an icy chill emerged from her heart, and her forehead was instantly covered in cold sweat. She was almost at the end of her rope and was barely hanging in by a thread. But fortunately, at this time the fire phoenix had already caught up with the divine dragon. Consequently, these two divine beasts' blood feud resumed. This provided Su Luo with a little opportunity that she could take advantage of. If the divine dragon did not fear of trouble in the rear, too, Su Luo knew she simply would not have been its opponent. Very likely she would have already been slashed to death by the divine dragon's claws without being able to run for more than several hundred meters. However, in the recent past Su Luo seemed to be cared for by the goddess of fortune. Against all expectations, on the back heels of this divine dragon, the fire phoenix followed up and continued its battle with the dragon. Moreover, this fire phoenix had narrow-mindedly, taken advantage of its difficulties. As a result, the divine dragon had no other alternative than to face Su Luo with hateful regret while gnashing its teeth. Whenever the divine dragon was about to kill off Su Luo, the fire phoenix that had been following close behind would come out and cause a disturbance. This kind of situation repeated itself again and again, enraging the divine dragon until it nearly spat out blood. But now, even Su Luo also had a kind of urge to spit out blood. It's over. When Su Luo saw the barren cliffs and the precipitous rock faces ahead, she immediately wanted to start to cry but lacked the tears to begin. At this time, all three directions moving forward were blocked by an overhanging cliff, and behind her the mother dragon pursued feverishly, unwilling to let go. Now she basically had nowhere to escape. What to do? Could it be that her hands were practically tied and set to be captured? Out of the question. Even if she was to return the adorable little dragon now, the divine dragon will absolutely not let her get away. At present she still had not arrived at the dead-end road, so surely there was still another chance to save herself. Sure enough, heaven never barred one's way. 5. Su Luo's sharp eyes saw a perfectly straight dark green creeper vine hanging down the cliff. Su Luo gave it a few tugs and found that this rope-like creeper vine was apparently frequently used by people before her. She need not worry about the firmness aspect of the vine. It seems as if the heavens really don't want me to die. Su Luo's heart immediately rejoiced. She tucked the adorable little dragon into her bosom, afterwards she used her hands to nimbly grab the creeper vine. She used both her hands and feet to rapidly climb up the tall overhanging cliff. It took her less than a quarter of the hour to reach the top. On top of the cliff was a flat plain covered by a meadow. A gentle breeze passed by and rustled a tidy area of the field into a rising and falling motion, like a jade-green wave that rippled. This sight gave her the sensation of an untroubled heart, pleased spirit. 6. Standing on top of the precipice and gazing into the distance. Su Luo could clearly see the feverish fight between the divine dragon and the fire phoenix not far away. It was as if they had claimed an area of heaven and earth for themselves. Fiery ocean patches spread endlessly, with soaring flames boiling over like lava. Chapter 80, To subdue a foolish, adorable, pampered spirit. 7, Good, very good, extremely good. If she didn't take advantage of this fortunate timing, she wouldn't get another chance. Su Luo's heart rejoiced. Using one hand, she brought out the adorable little dragon from within her embrace while the other hand searched within her bosom for the jade box that she had prepared. The celestial spirit water she stole from Su Manor and the spatial grass she received from Nangong Luoyun were both stored in the jade box. The jade box had the ability to keep things fresh that resembled refrigeration. Even if the spatial grass was stored for a few decades, when it's taken out later, it would be as tender and fresh as if it had just been picked. However, at this moment, a look of astonishment flashed through Su Luo's eyes. Where was the jade box? Where was her jade box? Su Luo's face immediately became puzzled and unconvinced. She remembered very clearly that when she was alone in the small wooden house before, she had personally taken out the jade box to check. How could it have disappeared? Did she lose it when she fell down the ancient tree? Not possible. She clearly remembered the jade box was in her arms when she tucked the adorable little dragon in there, too. How could it have suddenly disappeared between that time and now? Could it be that she had dropped it on top of the overhanging cliff? Su Luo looked down and began to search everywhere from left to right and in all directions. Ultimately, she ended up laying on the ground and rummaging through the soil, but she still could not find a trace of the jade box. This could truly be called, having picked up a sesame seed while losing a watermelon. Su Luo just wanted to cry but lacked the tears. Undoubtedly the dragon's blood is right in front of her, but the spatial grass and the celestial spirit water had actually disappeared. What could be worse? While Su Luo was in the midst of dismay and going around in circles, the adorable little dragon from the beginning had been looking up at Su Luo with a pair of eyes which contained a bewildered and foolishly stupid expression. Its thin and delicate little paws grabbed onto Su Luo's trouser leg and a pair of small, short legs followed Su Luo in continuously circling around. Furthermore, it seemed as if it was chewing something in its mouth. A flash of insight appeared in Su Luo's mind. She suddenly remembered the scene of the adorable little dragon eating the eggshells from before. She couldn't be that unlucky, right? A kind of ominous premonition emerged from within Su Luo's heart. She picked up the adorable little dragon and with slender fingers pried open its tiny dragon mouth. Following a close examination, 3 lines of bursting veins formed on Su Luo's forehead. For a split second she even had the desire to strangle the adorable little dragon. What did she see? She actually found pieces of the jade box in the adorable little dragon's mouth that had yet to be swallowed. She absolutely could not have mistaken that bright green characteristic of the jade. This little thing. It actually ate the small jade box. Su Luo had a strong urge to flip the little dragon on its stomach in her lap and spank its butt. After a while of being mad at herself, Su Luo unhappily fixed her gaze on the adorable little dragon, as if attempting to kill it with her meaningful glare. However, the adorable little dragon seemed to be completely unaware of her glare. Instead, its head weaved to and fro, its sleepy eyes were drowsy from dozing off, the corner of its mouth was even splitting out tiny blue bubbles. Su Luo was so infuriated that with a swish, she took out her personal dagger. She threateningly gestured everywhere along the small body of the adorable little dragon with the dagger and very fiercely said. Celestial spirit water and the spatial grass were swallowed, but it shouldn't have been digested yet, right? The adorable little dragon opened its misty eyes. Its face had a sluggish look of having just woken up. She only saw its little mouth move closer, and then afterwards a crisp chomp sound rang out. Su Luo was once again dumbfounded. She rigidly fixed her eyes on the dagger handle used for self-protection and once again had a feeling of being driven irascibly mad. Damn it! Nangong Luyun had said this dagger was made from top-grade iron and also bragged about how exceptionally sharp it was. Unexpectedly it had become lunch for this little guy who in one bite chewed it apart. The adorable little dragon was munching away as if eating something very delicious like a cookie, with crisp crunching noises that gave off a sweet and flavorful impression. Su Luo was about to hit her forehead again. She felt that if she was to continue to stay together with the adorable little dragon, either she will be driven mad by this silly little dragon, or she will cut this silly little dragon into pieces. These were the only two possible roads she could take. Chapter 81, To Subdue a Foolish, Adorable, Pampered Spirit. 8. Just what had she walked away with? Originally she thought it was a treasure from the heavens, but she never would have expected that she had actually carried back a tiny demon. Before she believed that she was the goddess of fortune reincarnated as a mortal, but, now she felt that she was a villain that had killed the goddess's father and led to her decline. How did it end up like this? Spatial grass and celestial spirit water were gone. Doesn't this mean that she will never be able to open her space? The adorable little dragon apparently could detect Su Luo's anxiety, and it tilted its tiny head. Su Luo worriedly paced around with the dragon's swaying little legs following closely behind. It wobbled and shook while it fumbled after her from here to there. If strangers were to see this scene, they might be unsure whether to laugh or cry. In the end, Su Luo crouched down, picked up the silly little dragon, looked it in the eye, and fiercely asked, "Little guy, you tell me. Should I stew you, or roast you, or stir-fry you?" The silly little dragon was completely unaware it was about to be food. It tilted its head, and a pair of large, limpid, amber eyes foolishly watched Su Luo with a deep sense of puzzlement. Don't know how to speak right? Then I'll just take it as you agreeing with whatever I choose. Su Luo smiled while Fish lay surveying it, holding her broken dagger and gestured over its little paws. As her mind became clear she began to realize something. Since Nangong Luyun had obtained a blade of spatial grass, it should be the case that there was a second one. As for the celestial spirit water, since the Su family had been able to obtain it before, then there was sure to be more in this world. As long as she spends some time searching, then she definitely will find it. As for this dragon's blood, if not for a coincidence by chance, it would have been even harder to come by. What's more, this was actually divine dragon's blood, and much better when compared to the whatever inferior blood that came from the armored-back dragon. However, looking at the silly little dragon in front of her, Su Luo had her worries. This little thing, that had just hatched, was so thin and feeble, with delicate arms and legs. How could she take action? She had no desire to kill it, she only wanted to take a little blood from it. But she was worried that with one strike of her dagger would the adorable little dragon die. Just when Su Luo was indecisively wavering, suddenly the adorable little dragon leaned closer to her bosom, with eyes closed it reflexively sniffed around in her embrace like a piglet seeking milk to drink. Su Luo immediately became speechless. With one grab she pulled out the little guy and unhappily scowled, "I'm definitely not your dragon mother, so don't even think about poking around." The silly little dragon opened its misty eyes, and it stupidly looked at Su Luo. Suddenly she only saw it opening its little mouth, a sharp and clear dragon's cry was uttered like a soft whistle. Su Luo was immediately caught off guard, and her eardrums were in extreme pain from the shock. Her qi and blood rolled over into the pit of her stomach. She almost spitted out another mouthful of blood again. However, without waiting for Su Luo's reaction, the silly little dragon immediately opened its mouth and bit Su Luo's wrist. Ah! A burst of acute pain almost made Su Luo jump up. Although it had just hatched, dragon seeds are still dragon species, gifted and super strong. Its baby teeth were sharp, hard and strong. Su Luo's blood madly rushed forth from the bite wound on her wrist. She discovered that if she continued to stay with the silly little dragon, she sooner or later would be spitting out blood. If she wasn't busy being infuriated to the point of spitting blood, then she would be jolted by its roars to spit blood, or just bleeding from its bite. Su Luo scowled at the silly little dragon, but it employed both of its limpid, water-clogged eyes and returned her gaze with a woebegone, pity-me expression. Moreover, both of its paws were clenched into tiny fists under its chin in an irresistibly cute posture. Looking at the pitiful appearance of the silly little dragon, Su Luo's breath was trapped in her lungs and was unable to explode out. Just at this moment, suddenly a band of intense, golden radiance enveloped the silly little dragon. She merely saw a small round lump of blood flew out of the silly little dragon's mouth. This blood had Su Luo's blood within it and also contained the little foolish dragon's own blood. She only saw that ball of blood unexpectedly take the form of a strange pattern of symbols. This design emitted an intensely dense and black air of mystery. Su Luo was dumbfounded as she watched this scene, she simply was unable to react. This really is. Previously, she had flipped through all the books on this continent's history and general knowledge, therefore a faint speculation appeared in her mind. Chapter 82, You Have Been Abandoned. 1. She saw that ball of blood quickly split in two, half flew into Su Luo's body, the other half flew into the adorable little dragon's body. While Su Luo was still standing there astonished, a burst of pain suddenly penetrated through her brain. Afterwards, an enormous amount of knowledge immediately rushed into her head like a tide. The adorable little dragon had actually formed a contract with her. Moreover, it was a contract between equals, not one of subjugation. Adorable little dragon, what are you called? Su Luo could sense a thread of spiritual connection with the adorable little dragon, as if she can conduct a telepathic exchange with it. Ma, the young dragon's words weren't clear. Mama? What kind of name it that? Forget it, I'll just call you Meng Meng, from now on, okay? Su Luo's slender figures rubbed the round and chubby head of the adorable little dragon. Ha, the adorable little dragon seemed to be overjoyed. It laughed until its eyes became narrow lines. Without using any power, she had managed to subdue a little divine dragon. This gave Su Luo a feeling of being blessed, akin to the sensation of pies magically falling from the sky. Anyways, it was obvious that the goddess of fortune once again favored her. Suddenly, the scene in front of her eyes blurred. Su Luo dodged, but she had already entered a completely unfamiliar place. Su Luo carried the adorable little dragon and inquisitively looked around. Don't tell me, could it be that this was her space? But this space was really small and only about 10 square meters in size. Moreover, it only had a small fountain-like spirit spring and there was nothing else. Also, what made Su Luo even more depressed was that the adorable little dragon's body can enter. But as for her, only her spirit can enter. Her spirit entered the space, but her body was still outside. This made her somewhat depressed. It proved that her space was different from the legendary rumored space in one's body. The space spoken of in legendary rumors stated that the owner can enter with their physical body. This way, when in danger, the person at any time can avoid harm by entering their space. This indeed was the best treasure to bypass being killed for property while on a journey away from home. The reason why Su Luo dared to kidnap the adorable little dragon was largely in part due to her certainty that when the moment comes, she would have her space. When the divine dragon that chased and wanted to kill her arrived, she could hide in her space and thus her safety would be guaranteed. However, looking at the current situation, she would have to take her time making a decision, too. Su Luo quietly examined this difficult-to-come-by space. At this moment, the adorable little dragon had already taken some steps with its little short legs. Its entire body was on its stomach by the side of the spirit spring, with its little head leaning in to enthusiastically drink the spring water. The mouth of the spring was merely the size of a wooden barrel and the spring water was so clear that you could see the bottom. It also issued a faint but sweet fragrance. Su Luo drank a mouthful from the spirit spring and immediately felt as if the filth in her entire body had washed away, leaving nothing behind. Her entire body was relaxed and invigorated, her bright expression was full of crisp vital energy. But, this was not right. Su Luo suddenly realized that this spirit spring compared to the celestial spirit water she stole from the Su manor was exactly the same. She previously had tasted a tiny bit of the celestial spirit water, so now with just one drink she could determine it. Su Lu immediately felt as if a stone was lodged in her throat, making her speechless. Before, in order to get that celestial spirit water, she had suffered untold hardships to steal it. She had been chased after by that conveniently cheap old father, which caused her to run around the entire manor. However, she never expected that after opening her space, the celestial spirit water available did not amount to mere bottles but instead contained an entire fountain of spirit spring. Wasn't the goddess of fortune smile down upon her too much? There was no way she could return the favor. While Su Luo was in the midst of her narcissistic thoughts, suddenly she had a very bad premonition. She became aware of a scathing murderous aura that was closing in from afar. She exited her space and tilted her head up to look. That divine dragon who was pursuing closely without letting go had arrived. Now, it sprayed a mouthful of dragon's breath directly towards her. Su Luo was so scared that her complexion quickly changed. She turned and just ran, similar to a cunning rabbit running at lightning speed. 1. Meng Meng, Chinese pinyin for the character adorable. She named the dragon Adorable, Adorable. 2. To take her time making a decision, idiom, to consider at length. Chapter 83, You have been abandoned. 2. Maybe it was due to drinking the celestial spirit water, but Su Luo suddenly that felt her whole body had become light and graceful. She felt as lithe as a swallow, and her speed compared to before was faster by a large margin. Previously she was shaken until she spat out blood. She had run until utter exhaustion, but under a mouthful of spirit spring, these symptoms had now all disappeared. Run, run, run. Su Luo ran to the other side, grabbed the creeper vine and jumped off to swung all the way to the other side of the cliff. The divine dragon was tightly pursuing behind her, unwilling to let go. It breathed out a dragon's breath towards her, half of the cliff suddenly collapsed, numerous rocks began to rain onto Su Luo. Su Luo fell like a flexible flood dragon, jumping right and left as she continued to dodge. When the chase got extremely close for comfort, Su Luo suddenly had a flash of insight that made her firmly slap herself in the head. Her space had been opened already, so the adorable little dragon's blood held no more use for her. She can just return the adorable little dragon. How could she have been so stupid? How could she not have thought of this earlier? Su Luo's thoughts were well developed, but reality was very different. When she had come out, the adorable little dragon had been thrown into her space, so currently, Su Luo could clearly see the adorable little dragon with its tiny but raised and its whole body lying in front of the fountain. It had its face in the spirit spring glup, glup, drinking it down. Slowly, the places where the spirit spring was located began to disappear. Inside Su Luo, her mind and heart were in great pain. She hastily summoned the adorable little dragon in her mind, Little Meng Meng, good boy, nice boy, quickly come out now. The adorable little dragon continued to drink. Your home's master is about to be beaten up by your mom. Quickly come out. Su Luo dodged left and right, while she continued to call anxiously. The adorable little dragon clutched the earth at the side of the spirit spring with its two small paws, dipped its head and continued to drink. On Su Luo's head, 3 lines of veins burst out. This disobedient little guy, when she escaped this, he'll see how she'll spank his little ass. On this road, Su Luo was being chased by the divine dragon while constantly zigzagging and scurrying around in all directions. Finally, even she did not know where she had ended up. Suddenly, Su Luo sensed that there were people in front, and they were even people she was familiar with. Su Luo's eyes flashed with a secretive and evil look, then, with no guilt at all, she guided the divine dragon in their direction. Leading the trouble to the east, too, this was a trick Su Luo was very skilled at. Soon, Su Luo had gotten so close that she could see a 5-person group. The group was not just any random group. It was none other than Lu Ruohua's group. When Lu Ruohua turned her head to see Su Luo's whole body's battered and exhausted appearance, obviously she looked very happy. She looked up, down and all over Su Luo. At last with an unbridled laugh she grinned, "Su Luo, so it was you? We were only separated for so long, yet how did you become this embarrassingly disheveled?" Su Luo absent-mindedly looked over at her. She blandly responded with one sentence, "And you're not unkempt." Currently, Lu Ruohua's clothing was filthy and tattered from head to toe. Her face was covered in scars from being scratched by tree branches, bloody all over. She was a complete mess. Her face was probably injured by the tornado from before. Lu Weiming looked at Su Luo, his eyes flashed with a complex look. He laughed with enthusiasm, "Miss Su. How come His Highness Prince Jin is not with you?" Su Luo let out a sigh. His Highness Prince Jin had some business and left for a while. He will be back soon. Do you have some business that need him? When she heard this, Lu Ruohua let out a huge, maniacal mocking laugh. She pointed at Su Luo and said, "You little credit-claiming whore. You think we don't know? His Highness Prince Jin had already left chasing after the Jade Lake's ferry. He abandoned you, yet you still don't understand. You're just His Highness Prince Jin's plaything, a pawn that he can always discard at any time." 1. Flood Dragon, legendary dragon with the abilities to control rain and floods. 2. Leading the trouble to the east, idiom, meaning redirecting the trouble onto someone else. Chapter 84, You have been abandoned. 3. What nonsense are you saying? Su Luo feigned anger and glared at her with eyes full of hatred. What I said was nonsense. Ha, 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 I'm laughing to death. I'm really dying of laughter. Lu Ruohua laughed until tears came out. In her heart, her crazy envy of Su Luo completely dispersed into haze due to Su Luo having been discarded. Only Lu Ruohua's taunting laugh could be heard. She then sneered, "How about you tell me? Didn't His Highness Prince Jin go looking for the Jade Lake's ferry?" Su Luo smiled coldly. Lu Ruohua's guess wasn't wrong. Didn't Nangong Luyun really leave to go look for the Jade Lake's ferry? He deserted her, left her in the small wooden house. Wasn't it precisely because he wanted to look for the Jade Lake's ferry? Seeing the complicated mood on Su Luo's face, Lu Ruohua was happy to the extreme. She covered her belly while laughing heartily. She was laughing so hard that she could barely breathe. Su Luo, ah, Su Luo. Here I was under the impression that you had a lot of skills. After all, His Highness Prince Jin was so loving towards you. You probably didn't expect that you being favored would last for a mere 2 days. Ha, ha, ha. Su Luo only watched her laugh quietly, a secretive light appearing in her eyes. However, it wasn't possible to see any changes on her face as it remained inscrutable. Lu Ruohua had enough of laughing, turned towards Lu Weiming and said, "The wild serpent's inner core is still on her body. Shouldn't we take it back?" Lu Weiming frowned slightly, a trace of hesitance flickering across his eyes. After a while, he finally said, "Didn't she already swallow it?" Lu Ruohua's face showed contempt for his idiocy while her eyes glared at Lu Weiming. Are you stupid? How can the inner core of the wild serpent be so easily digested? Maybe it's still in her digestive tract undamaged and intact. Being uncertain, why not just cut open her belly and then we'll know for sure, right? Lu Weiming was somewhat hesitant. After all, previously His Highness Prince Jin had displayed a very caring manner towards Su Luo. Lu Ruohua let out a sneering laugh. Don't you see? His Highness Prince Jin has already abandoned her. Otherwise, why would His Highness Prince Jin chase after the Jade Lake's fairy? Could it be that you think this slut can even be compared to the Jade Lake's fairy? If you were asked to choose, would you choose the precious, gloriously flowery fairy or this good-for-nothing? Don't tell me you feel that His Highness Prince Jin's vision can't be compared to yours. Lu Ruohua's words coaxed at every step, penetrating deeply through each layer of resistance. Lu Weiming's expression had a frightful hidden depth. It issued a nebulous, deadly threatening air. He was aware that Lu Ruohua wanted to avenge a personal grudge, so she was trying to bewitch him, but he was still unable to refuse. The inner core of the wild serpent was indeed very important to him. As long as he could get the inner core, he would have the opportunity to become the personal disciple of Grandmaster Lan Hai. In that case, his cultivation road in the future would have propitious wind throughout the journey, as compared to harsh challenges one after another. A trace of a smile slowly emerged on Lu Weiming's face. It was an icy cold and extremely dangerous smile. The dagger he hid in his sleeve suddenly moved. A trace of a sneer flashed through Su Luo's heart. A bunch of idiots. What are you guys thinking of doing? Su Luo deliberately shouted out loudly and anxiously. If His Highness Prince Jin found out that you guys killed me, then he will never let you guys go. Bragging like you have a tiger's pelt and actually hoisting it as a banner. Lu Ruohua measured her with a cold and threatening laugh. His Highness Prince Jin. First, let's not even talk about whether or not His Highness Prince Jin would seek revenge on your behalf. Granted, even if he wanted to avenge you, he won't find you. Here in the Sunset Mountain Range, it's full of magical beasts. After the magical beasts have gnawed on your bones, I don't know if His Highness Prince Jin will even recognize that chunk of bones is you, Su Luo. You guys, Su Luo's words had yet to be completed, when she felt a sinister human shadow already standing behind her back. The deeply cold handle of the dagger was headed towards her throat. Assassin. She would never have thought that Lu Weiming was like her, someone proficient in assassin techniques. A very dangerous and icy cold smile appeared on Su Luo's face. Propitious wind throughout the journey, idiom, plain sailing, to go smoothly, have a nice trip. Chapter 85, The Lovable, Adorable, Little Dragon. 1. Lu Weiming could only watch as Su Luo's feet slid away, her entire body slipping from his hand like a mudfish. Before he could react, her figure was already 10 meters away. Lu Weiming's dagger promptly met with empty air. A thread of surprise flashed through his eyes. He could feel that Su Luo's body did not contain a shred of spiritual power. This was sufficient to illustrate that she was simply an ordinary person that could not be more common and a waste of space. On the other hand, he, himself was already a third-ranked mage. However, his sneak attack actually did not succeed. This gave him a strong feeling of having been thwarted. The corner of Su Luo's mouth evoked a smile that was nearly impossible to catch sight of. She smiled coldly. With her feet not even touching the ground, Su Luo turned her body and just ran. She could feel that the battle between the Divine Dragon and the Fire Phoenix was over. Now, the Divine Dragon is free to chase after her again in order to kill her. If you have the ability, then don't run. Lu Ruohua shouted, then immediately gave chase. If you have the ability, then don't chase. Su Luo turned her head around and made a face at Lu Ruohua. Telling her not to run, do they think that she was an idiot? A strong killing intent flashed through Lu Weiming's eyes. If a moment ago he had not made a move, then the matter would be over. Since he had already attempted an attack, he must now complete the task and eliminate all evidence. Otherwise, if Su Luo was to make sinister accusations in front of His Highness Prince Jin later on, their lives would be forfeit. Even though His Highness Prince Jin had tossed her aside and left, God knows when the temperamental Prince Jin would change his mind and go look for her again. At this moment, Lu Weiming's eyes held a sinister bloodlust, overflowing with killing intent. The others watched as he ran so fast he seemed to be flying, tightly nipping at Su Luo's heels. He followed her closely, not giving her a chance to escape. Behind him, those 4 people without exception also chased after Su Luo to chip away at the task without abandoning it, too. Even if they were to die, they must behead her with their own blades. The distance between the two parties becomes shorter by the second as the chasing party drew closer with each step. Closer and closer. Hey, something is wrong, Lu Weiming suddenly frowned. He sensed a dangerous atmosphere coming from behind them. He turned his head to look and his complexion immediately became pale white as paper. Both of his legs went limp, making it nearly impossible for him to stand. Seeing him like this, everyone turned their heads around to look. Heavens, oh heavens. Is that a snake-type beast? You stupid airhead, thinking that it's a type of snake beast. That's a dragon. A divine dragon. Once he said those words, everyone present stopped talking and were as silent as the dead. A divine dragon that legend said could destroy a city with a stomp of its feet, the venerable divine dragon. It was simply too frightening. Even more terrifying was the fact that the divine dragon, behind them, was tenaciously chasing after them. Its eyes were full of a violent hatred and enmity as if they had stolen its child. But what caused the venerable divine dragon to even feel that they were worth chasing, let alone chasing them with intent to kill? At this moment they simply did not have time to think, their brains just weren't functioning. They only knew to step forward and run. Each ran as fast as they possibly could. If one of them could run past their companions, then that person would have a better chance of surviving. At this time, everyone was incomparably disheveled and unkempt. Running in front of them was Su Luo, who was smiling with sinister treachery. Since Lu Weiming and the divine dragon both wanted to kill her, in that case, let them first massacre each other. After the winner has been decided, the survivor could then seek her to battle it out. Leading the trouble to the east. 3. Borrowing someone else's knife to kill another. These were tricks that Su Luo was most skilled at. In any case, Lu Weiming and companions had sinister and very savage intentions. Regarding this matter, she didn't feel even a tiny bit of guilt. Poor Lu Weiming and his companions who still didn't know that this divine dragon had been lured here. If they only knew that as long as they ran separate from Su Luo, they would escape being chased by the menacing divine dragon. However, people in times of danger will inevitably only have one thought, must firmly hold on to the target ahead and never let go. As a result, this doomed them to a tragic play. In contrast, Su Luo was very perceptive of human nature. She was certain that Lu Weiming and companions will make a move against her. Su Luo was also confident that they weren't aware that she had lured the divine dragon here. She was even more certain that when Lu Weiming and companions tried to escape the divine dragon, they would follow right behind her and become her protective shield. 1. The author used 3 zhang, 1 zhang equals 10 Chinese foot, qi, or 3 meters. 2. Chip away at the task without abandoning it, to chisel away at sth, to persevere, unflagging efforts. 3. Leading the trouble to the east, idiom, meaning redirecting the trouble onto someone else. Chapter 86, The Lovable, Adorable, Little Dragon. 2. When it came to astute schemes or sophisticated shrewdness, Su Luo would absolutely not lose to anyone. Poof! The divine dragon sprayed out a mouthful of dragon's breath. Dense black as ink fumes enveloped the few people running at the rear and covered them in a round sphere. In the divine dragon's eyes, these insignificant humans running together with Su Luo were her comrades, and they all deserved to die. She was afraid that by killing Su Luo she would hurt the little dragon, but in regards to these tiny ants she had no such misgivings. Consequently, she did not control her dragon's breath. Ah! A desperate cry came from the group of people that had fallen behind. It was uttered by a person from Lu Weiming's team. This youngster had a huge crush on Lu Ruohua, thus he was very amenable to her. However, at the most critical moment when the dragon's breath arrived, he gave Lu Ruohua a helping push, whereas Lu Ruohua had simultaneously pushed him towards the back. She took this opportunity to escape. This youngster's face was full of despair as he got caught up within the dragon's breath. He watched with an incredulous face as Lu Ruohua's back became ever more distant. His eyes were full of surprise. He would never have thought that he, who gave Lu Ruohua a helping hand, would have been pushed back by such an opportunistic Lu Ruohua. Even as he died he still couldn't understand, why did she do it? This was just human nature. Selfish and cold-blooded, forgetful of favors and violators of justice, one, that bite the hands that feed them. This originally was a team of 6 people, however, in the beginning, a person had died because of the wild serpent. Now another had been killed by the divine dragon, so now there were only 4 people left in the team. The captain Lu Weiming, Lu Ruohua, Li Wan, and another youngster. The divine dragon kept getting closer, as if it was almost within a hand's reach. Another tragic cry sounded out. It was that of yet another youngster being consumed by the divine dragon's wrath in one mouthful, leaving not even a scrap behind. Su Luo was flying and running at lightning speed, but even she was unable to keep her heart from trembling. As she turned to see each and every one of the human meat shields behind her about to be swallowed, she could only dread when it would be her turn. Let's split up and run. Otherwise, we'll all die. Lu Weiming was worthy of being named captain, for once he calmed down, he very quickly found the only solution. There was only one divine dragon, so as long as everyone scattered in all 4 directions, then at least 3 of the people could have a chance of escape. Lu Weiming sent Su Luo a quick glare full of hatred. He knew, Su Luo must die within Sunset Mountain range. If she was to walk out alive, heaven knows how His Highness Prince Jin will deal with them once he learned the news that they had wanted to kill her. Even if they died, they wouldn't want His Highness Prince Jin as an enemy. Therefore the best way was to get someone else to do his dirty work. He was going to borrow the might of the divine dragon to eradicate Su Luo. Having thought about this point, Lu Weiming, Lu Ruohua, and Li Wan exchanged glances. He made a hand gesture, consequently all 3 darted toward 3 different directions. She had no choice but to say Lu Weiming's method was truly correct. He had succeeded by a lucky stroke, and saved his own life and maybe even the lives of Lu Ruohua and Li Wan. Watching as those 3 people scattered, Su Luo's heart had a sense of loss. Alas, the human-shaped meat shields were gone. Now her only hope was placed on the body of the adorable little dragon. The divine dragon gave chase and was getting closer and closer. Finally it cornered Su Luo at the base of an overhanging cliff. 3 sides were sheer cliffs and precipitous walls of rock. There were absolutely no routes of escape. Su Luo raised both of her hands, turned around. Her face had a very flattering smile. Hey, venerable divine dragon, are you tired? Would you like to rest a bit? The divine dragon's malevolently fierce face flashed, an unsympathetic and ice-cold pair of eyes had brought the atmosphere to a sub-zero temperature. It was fixated on Su Luo as if watching a dead person. It looked everywhere around Su Luo's body but was surprised when she couldn't find her little treasured baby. In a short while she became furious. Do not, do not, do not. Su Luo was so anxious that she was sweating. 1. Forgetful of favors and violate justice. Idiom, ingratitude to a friend, to kick a benefactor in the teeth. Chapter 87, The Lovable, Adorable, Little Dragon. 3. She continuously called out to the adorable little dragon with her mind. She shouted mentally until her brain almost cramped up. However, the adorable little dragon continued to lie firmly on its belly beside the spirit spring. Its little face looked up, showing a pair of large winsome eyes with crocodile tears flowing down its face. It gave Su Luo a pitiful and wretched expression as if she had caused it to feel aggrieved. Within the space, Su Luo's spirit form glared at the little dragon with a fierce expression. If you don't come out now, your mother dragon will kill me with one spray of dragon's breath. At that time you will also die. Let's play this game together. She could not understand. Clearly on the other side was its birth mother, but the little dragon incorrectly kept looking at her and would not leave the space. Could it be that its own family was not as appealing as someone else's family? No wonder some kids, for whom exotic delicacies were the norm in their own family homes, preferred to eat ordinary vegetables dishes from other families. The adorable little dragon continued to use those pitiful eyes to look at Su Luo. Su Luo faked a fierce appearance and single-handedly picked up the adorable little dragon, preparing to return it. But, both of the adorable little dragon's paws had a death grip on the edge of the spirit spring and refused to let go. Crocodile tears were falling from its eyes, as if to say that Su Luo was a human trafficker who kidnapped and sold children. Su Luo propped up her head with one hand. Whose family did this spoiled child really belong to? Please come and quickly carry it home, because she couldn't afford to raise it. She merely wanted to return the little dragon to its original owner, so what was so wrong with that? The little dragon was making it seem as if she was sending it to the execution block. Finally, Su Luo was left without any other option. If the little dragon didn't show its face now, the divine dragon will definitely kill her with a mouthful of dragon's breath. As a result, Su Luo cajoled the little dragon using a gentle tone and displayed a friendly appearance. She clenched her teeth, put on a warm, tender smile and said, "How about I fill a large bucket with the spirit spring and you can take it home with you?" The adorable little dragon shook its head. That wouldn't be nearly enough. Su Luo was frustrated, but she, once again, put on a coaxing smile and said, "Then how about? Let's first go greet your mother dragon and politely ask about her health, okay? After all, she has not seen you since you hatched." The adorable little dragon shook its head. It was certain it would be carried away. Su Luo only felt the space between her eyebrows burst with aggravation. Finally, she gave a secretive calculating smile and quickly picked up the adorable little dragon. "You think I won't be able to pick you up?" Harumph, humph. It came to Su Luo that within her space, she was the boss. When the adorable little dragon was lifted out of her space and appeared in her arms, the divine dragon had been in the midst of brewing a second dragon's breath. "Your Eminence, hurry and take it back." Su Luo cupped the adorable little dragon with both hands and hastily rushed forward to give it back. She placed the adorable little dragon on the ground and motioned the little guy to hurry up and pay its respect. It should be said that the divine dragon had also suffered bitterly. After many trials and tribulations she birthed the egg, then had to incubate it for a long time. Once the adorable little dragon was born, in spite of everything it refused to go home. It forced this new mother to chase after it and had succeeded in embarrassing her to death. The adorable little dragon, with wobbled and swaying steps, turned its head back every step and shuffled to the front of the divine dragon. The angry mother dragon used a water bucket-sized forefinger and poked its head, causing the adorable little dragon to bend over like a roly-poly and, with a loud thumping sound, fall backwards. That sight was comically funny and laughable, such that Su Luo almost laughed out loud. However, the divine dragon just indifferently swept her eyes towards Su Luo. That expression was cold as ice, and a frosty air started to climb up from the soles of her feet. All at once, Su Luo could not laugh anymore. The eyes of the divine dragon contained an endless killing intent, and its ferocious expression gave off a violently irate mood. It was about to let loose a wave of dragon's breath towards Su Luo. However, just at this time, the adorable little dragon clutched at the divine dragon's finger and followed the path up its arm, wobbling and swaying as it climbed up. Finally its tiny buttocks sat on top of the divine dragon's nose, cleanly dispersing the dragon's breath its mother was brewing. In that moment, the divine dragon and the adorable little dragon had an appearance of mutual affection for one another, of a mother and child. Su Luo's heart moved. If she didn't leave now, then what was she waiting for? If the divine dragon discovered that the adorable little dragon and her had formed a contract, she's afraid it would squash her to death with one slap of its claws. Hence, Su Luo walked quietly on the tips of her toe and retreated a few steps. After she had made some ground, she turned her body around and stealthily slipped away. Chapter 88, To Come Back from Death's Door, 1. Su Luo walked cautiously through the mountain range, hoping to find a way out. Right now her strength was very low, and she wouldn't dare indiscriminately dash around everywhere, bumping into things. As a result, she was very careful while making her way along the roads. She had already accomplished her goal for entering this mountain range. Although the process was very thrilling, her luck had been exceptionally good. There had been plenty of unforeseen perils and no shortage of danger. Not only had her space opened, she had also formed a contract of equals with the little divine dragon by a sheer accident among many implausible causes. However, it was a pity that the little divine dragon had been carried home by its mother dragon. Su Luo sighed, slowly searched for a path to leave the mountains. However, what she did not know was, that on the other side, Nangong Luyun was about to go mad in his search for her. Nangong Luyun's face was pale and unwaveringly fixed on the trunk of the 1,000-year-old ancient tree. His tightly clenched fist was blanched white. The ancient tree stood as before, but the wooden house that had been on the top had disappeared without a trace. For Nangong, it was as if someone had walked away, taking with them even the pots and pans, without even leaving a speck behind. As Nangong Luyun stared rigidly at that 1,000-year-old ancient tree, his eyes were ruthless, tyrannical and cold enough to freeze everything within his gaze. On his handsome face that was normally nefarious and devilishly charming, something had changed. Now his face was a wave of astral frost. His stare was violent like that of a wild beast's and filled with a cruel bloodlust. Nangong Luyun could only feel a sharp pain bursting from the area near his heart. The ache was so painful that he almost suffocated. By his side, stood an exquisitely beautiful woman that was elegant and quiet, seemingly above the common populace. She was dressed from head to toe in only a snowy white gown. A graceful neck, a slender waist, and, just below, a skirt that seemed to flow with the breeze, as if wishing to transform into a beautiful wisp then disappear like snow melting into spring. This person was not a stranger. She was none other than the rumored Jade Lake's fairy. In a deeply concerned manner, the Jade Lake's fairy placed her hand on Nangong Luyun, who was kneeling on the ground. Her red full lips gently and humbly stated. Third senior brother, 1, it's all Yao Yao's fault. Imposing on you until you sustained injuries, and also tiring you out until Miss Su disappear without a trace. Nangong Luyun's complexion was like a sheet of ice. He hadn't spoken a word, but his eyes were full of self-loathing and guilt. All of a sudden, he severely slapped himself hard, quickly followed by another slap. The strength his hands used could frighten people, and with only these 2 slaps, he was able to make himself vomit blood. Third senior brother. A thread of anguish flashed across Jade Lake's fairy's eyes. She hurriedly pulled at his hands to prevent him from doing further harm to himself. It's all my fault. If I didn't leave her, she wouldn't be. A thread of tormented pain flashed across Nangong Luyun's handsome face, which had lost all of its original devilish charm. His strained voice hinted that he was being choked by his own emotions. What happened here? How could Luo girl have disappeared? It was all his fault. He shouldn't have abandoned her in that moment of peril. If he didn't abandon her, how could this have had a chance to occur? In the midst of blaming himself, Nangong Luyun ruthlessly smashed his clenched fist towards the trunk of that 1,000-year-old ancient tree. The ancient tree, which had a width equivalent to 10 people that were wrapped arm in arm, fell to the ground with a bang. A large cloud of dust rose concluding its 1,000-year lifespan. A trace of complex emotion crossed through the eyes of the Jade Lake's fairy. Her cloudy eyes were like a sublime mist, partitioning the darkness in the innermost part of her heart. She held a deeply concerned expression on her face as she said to him, "Third senior brother. Don't worry too much. Who knows what happened to Miss Sue? Maybe even now she is having a fortuitous meeting. You don't understand. She doesn't any spirit strength in her body." A touch of despair passed through Nangong Liuyun's eyes. His Luo girl absolutely do not know how to harness spirit power. Alone and being left behind, how could she survive in this Sunset Mountain range when the entirety of its length and breadth was filled with wild beasts? Maybe even now, every time he thought about it, Nangong Luyun would feel waves of tormenting pain gripping his heart. This won't do. I must go look for her now. Nangong Luyun struggled to stand up because of insufficient strength. He almost fell. The Jade Lake's fairy saw Nangong Liuyun's body faintly tremble, as if he could not even stand, but he still insisted on going to search for Su Luo. She was almost unable to conceal the complicated expression in her eyes. Third senior brother, Chinese literal translation is third brother from the same teacher. Students under the same teacher can call each other brothers, sisters etc., often seen in martial arts sect. Chapter 89, To Come Back from Death's Door. 2. The Jade Lake's fairy pulled on Nangong Luyun, who was tottering on the verge of collapse. Her beautiful eyes moving cleverly around, her voice sounded justifiable and honest as she said. "Third senior brother, looking at how badly injured you are, how can you go search for her? Even if you could find her, if she really was in danger, would you be able to save her?" The Jade Lake fairy's words were reasonable and irrefutable. She had hit the nail on the head. Nangong Luyun truly had suffered severe injuries. In order to save the Jade Lake's fairy, his abdomen had been slashed heavily by the king vulture's claws and had bled profusely. Once he was able to finally stop the bleeding, Nangong Luyun had rushed here to look for Su Luo, only to find that she had disappeared. "Third senior brother, right now your first priority is to recover from your wounds." The Jade Lake's fairy gazed at him in concern. "Believe in me, okay? I'll send people to look for her right now. I trust they'll find this Miss Sue and bring her back quickly." Nangong Luyun struggled to get up, his wounds that he had worked so hard to close had reopened. Suddenly, fresh blood spurted from the wounds like spring water wildly rushing forward. Due to excessive blood loss, Nangong Liuyun's lips had turned white as paper while his face displayed a haggard appearance. Nangong Luyun firmly grabbed the hand of the Jade Lake's fairy. Although weak, he maintained his dignified manner and very seriously stated, "We must find her." "Okay." The Jade Lake fairy squeezed out a smile and solemnly nodded her head. Even Nangong Luyun failed to notice the flash of frost that passed through her eyes. After he finished speaking, Nangong Luyun sat down cross-legged and began exercising his powers to heal himself. He needed to nurse his body back to full health. His Luo girl was still waiting for him somewhere. The Jade Lake's fairy had successfully appeased Nangong Luyun. Seeing him begin the healing process, her beautiful watery eyes showed a look of deep anticipation while her red lips displayed a slight superficial smile. Then, she turned to leave. Beside a cliff covered with a bottomless drop covered in dense fog. The magnificent Jade Fairy stood on the edge of the cliff. Her long hair which flowed down to her ankles was dancing in the wind, giving the illusion that she was on the verge of taking flight, like a fairy. However, at this time, she had an indifferent and icy expression on her face. Behind her stood a row of 4 young women led by a woman named Qin Ning. Qin Ning was the magnificent Jade Fairy's most trusted attendant. The magnificent Jade Fairy's beautiful, simple, and neat face had a shallow smile. "Did all of you hear third senior brother's words? Now, the only task for you is to look for this Miss Sue. Qi Ning's reply was very direct. Glancing at the magnificent jade fairy's beautiful, cold, and expressionless face, she murmured. Yes. Remember, if still alive, I must see the person. If dead, I must see the corpse. The magnificent jade fairy unhurriedly spit out those words while stressing the last four. She continued to smile gently and gorgeously as before, so otherworldly beautiful that just a glance could drive all living things mad. Qi Ning had grown up together with the magnificent jade fairy, so once she heard the words she immediately understood their hidden meaning. A barely perceivable treacherous chill flashed in Qi Ning's eyes as she responded. This servant will not fail to comply with the young mistress's command, if living then must see the person, if dead then must see the corpse. The master and servant simultaneously laughed together, with mutual understanding. Qi Ning led the other three people and quickly walked away while sneering in her heart endlessly. A toad that wants to eat swan flesh. An insignificant idiotic girl dares to try to snatch a guy away from the young mistress. Is she looking to court her own death? That little slut. If she is dead, then it was over. If she wasn't dead, when the time comes, they will torment that slut until she wished she was dead. They will make her regret that she was ever born into this world. Qi Ning and the three women flew through the mountain range, following the crushed plants while flying as fast as lightning. When the divine dragon had previously chased after Su Luo, it had left behind a trail of destruction, making the route fairly obvious. Qi Ning moved along this road, continuously searching. Qi Ning and companions were rather lucky as they soon ran into Lu Ruohua. Chapter 90, To Come Back from Death's Door, 3, Qi Ning knew that Lu Ruohua had been with Su Luo before. After a little bit of questioning, she discovered that Su Luo had indeed been lucky enough to survive. She had even escaped from that tornado. Qi Ning gave her a sly and cold smile. It looks like their moment to earn some merit from the young princess was finally here. As a result of the directions provided by Lu Ruohua, Qi Ning was able to retrace the path that Su Luo had used when fleeing for her life. She was determined to hunt this Su Luo down. Su Luo still didn't know that Qi Ning had brought people to chase after her with the intent to kill. Right now she was in the middle of cooking a few stolen magical beasts' eggs over an open fire. During this entire afternoon, she had been constantly running away from those who wanted to kill her. Because of this, she had consumed a huge amount of her stamina, therefore she had to fill her stomach first. Besides, in this Sunset Mountain range, who knew when her next meal would be at? Her journey's bitter experiences, after entering Sunset Mountain range, made Su Luo realize that, in this world, strength was the most important thing to have. So she urgently needed to find a peaceful place to start her cultivation practices. Seeing her dual wood and fire elements encircling her body, Su Luo bit off a mouthful of magical beast's egg. Her heart was elated, she planned to find some basic wood, fire element books to practice with after leaving this place. Suddenly, Su Luo's hand that was holding the magical beast egg paused, a feeling of impending crisis assailed her thoughts. She had spent her entire previous life working as an assassin, so naturally Su Luo was most sensitive to this kind of murderous intent. She was absolutely sure she was not wrong about this. This was not the killing intent emitted by a magical beast but from a person. Su Luo saw the other few eggs still being cooked, without even having to think she picked them up and threw them into her space. She immediately headed into the forest and slipped away very quickly. Su Luo ran in a hurry for a full 4 hours, 1. When she finally stopped, she quickly hid behind a sheer cliff. Now the sky had gradually darkened towards night, the moon was casting its hazy shadow. Su Luo slowed down and quieted her breathing, she also slowed down her heartbeat. Her entire person was hidden in darkness blending in with the cliff within the dark night. Even master martial artist wouldn't be able to distinguish her from the face of the cliff. At that very moment, a maiden seemed to fly over from afar. Her clothes was white like snow, with a simple and neat appearance, a light blue-colored diaphanous outer layer covering her clothing. Her body gave off an exceedingly refined manner. Su Luo recognized her. She was not a stranger but one of the maids standing by the Jade Lake's ferry's side. Su Luo had an excellent memory. As long as she saw them before, even after a few years, she would be able to recognize them at once. This was especially true for someone she met only half a day ago. Su Luo, I know you are over there, come out, no need to hide. This person was called Chueyu, her call was cold and devoid of any mercy. In the darkness of the night, it conjured up quite a horrifying feeling. Su Luo sneered in her mind. If she really knew where Su Luo was, then why was she still looking around in all directions? How could this be considered knowing where she was? Was she underestimating her as a good-for-nothing greenhorn who knows nothing? However, Su Luo thought this was odd. Why had this maid come looking for her? And also why was she carrying a strong killing intent on her body? Was it because? Su Luo thought of a possibility. That kind of person, clear as ice and clean as jade, too, a woman seemingly not profaned by the worldly dust. Would she actually order her underlings to kill her? Although it was unreasonable, it was also not impossible. Conan, 3, said it best, if you rule out everything that was impossible, then the remaining reason must be the truth, no matter how crazy it sounded. It seemed that the Jade Lake's fairy was also human. She originally thought that she was so temperate, so lofty and unsoiled, so exceedingly refined, and so above the common people. But as it turned out, she was also a woman that would go frantically crazy over a man. Su Luo's heart smiled coldly. She must capture this girl and confirm her own guess, so she can determine who her real enemy was. She, Su Luo, was never a person to sit and wait for death. If others want to kill her, then they must pay with their lives. Su Luo motionlessly hid somewhere below the cliff, waiting for Chueyu to get closer. 1. Chinese divided our modern 24 hours cycle into 12 shichin. So 1 shichin equals 2 hours. Su Luo ran 2 shichin here. So from now on I'll just calculate the time without mentioning the shichin. 2. Clear as ice and clean as jade, idiom, spotless, irreproachable, incorruptible. 3. Conan, is the Chinese name for Detective Conan from the Japanese anime/manga Mitantii Conan, otherwise known in America as Case Closed. Thank you readers for pointing out that Conan or Conan is the middle name of Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, original source of this quote and inspiration for the anime/manga. Pretty sure the author was referring to Case Closed. Chapter 91, To Come Back from Death's Door. 4. Suddenly, in the darkness of the night, the silvery tip of a dagger shined brightly. Su Luo's body shifted as quick as lightning and within seconds had already arrived at Chueyu's back. Su Luo's half-broken dagger was wielded with deadly aim towards Chueyu's throat. Su Luo's movements were precise and nimble, merciless and bloodthirsty, there wasn't a single wasted motion. Chueyu proved to be a second-ranked martial artist. She sensed danger approaching and slid to the left while attempting to stab the person behind with her sword. However, she was already a step too late. While Chueyu was leaning left to avoid the dagger aimed at her throat, Su Luo had already anticipated Chueyu's actions and had moved the dagger there in advance. Therefore, when Chueyu leaned to the left, she ran directly into the dagger. A schluck sound lightly echoed and a stream of blood rushed out like spring water. Chueyu did not die immediately, but the pain caused her to roll around on the ground. The instant kill failed because Su Luo's dagger had lost half of its effectiveness. Half of the dagger had been chewed off by the adorable little dragon previously, therefore it was not sharp enough to kill Chueyu instantly. Su Luo coldly watched Chueyu rolling around on the ground in pain and quietly asked, "Why are you trying to kill me? You must die." Chueyu's facial features were malevolent, her expression twisted, but her chin was still unbending and arrogantly raised. Just tell me the truth and I'll release you from your suffering. How do you feel about this deal? Su Luo said with a bargaining tone as she squatted down and gave Cui Yu a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Cui Yu coldly turned her face away, not paying any attention to Su Luo's threats. In Cui Yu's eyes, Su Luo was just an ant. She would never admit that Su Luo was stronger than her. Very courageous of you. Su Luo pulled out the blood-encrusted, half-broken dagger. Her smile was genial, like a warm breeze. It did not contain even a hint of anger. As you already know, my dagger is very dull. It can't kill a person in one strike. Humph. Cui Yun firmly spat out. Very good. I admire your courageous spirit. I hope you can keep it up as we continue. Su Luo's face held a faint yet sly smile. She smiled with ease while the dagger mercilessly zoomed towards Cui Yu's finger. A finger was forcibly cut off. Cui Yu was in so much pain that her tears and mucus flowed out together. The agony almost made her pass out. Without waiting for Cui Yu to speak, the second finger was quickly severed and went flying off. The third finger. I'll talk. I'll talk. A trace of startled surprise flashed through Cui Yu's eyes. She did not understand. Even though Cui Yu is a practitioner of martial arts, she would not be able to use such a cruel method. How was Su Luo able to do it so skillfully and with such a gentle and soft smile, at that? It was as if what she was slicing off were not fingers but pieces of bread. This person was simply a monster. You need not be so anxious. I haven't completely chopped them all off yet. Su Luo gestured with her hand as if to say she still wished to continue cutting off more. Cui Yu reluctantly but loudly said, it was the young mistress that told us to kill you. For every grievance, someone is responsible. For every debt, there is a debtor. If you have the ability, then go look for the young mistress to seek your revenge. Why would she want to kill me? As expected, it was the Jade Lake's fairy who wanted to kill her. Cui Yu stared at Su Luo as if looking at an idiot. Do you really not understand? Our young mistress from when she was little until now is deeply attached to His Highness Prince Jean. They grew up together and since childhood, their mutual affection was unlike others. In everyone's eyes, the young mistress and Prince Jean was like a pair of jade annulus. As for you, His Highness Prince Jean actually kissed you. Therefore, you cannot be forgiven. Just because he kissed me, thus your Jade Lake's fairy wants to kill me? Su Luo coldly smiled. Her guess was indeed correct. Yes. Because His Highness Prince Jean does not allow others to get close to him. The only person who can even touch him is our young mistress. Now, there is a third wheel and that is you. Therefore, you must die. Chapter 92, To Come Back from Death's Door, 5, So It's Like That. A thread of frost appeared in Su Luo's eyes, and a barely visible smile rose from the corner of her mouth. What bullshit title, fairy. More like, exceedingly refined, cow dung, what being above the common populace's dirty emotions, they were all a bunch of dog shit. Nangong Luyun was so stupid, that it made her want to laugh. He always bragged about being highly intelligent, but was unable to see clearly that the woman by his side had the heart of a snake and the methods of a scorpion. What about Nangong Luyun? How is he right now? A hidden meaning passed through Su Luo's huge eyes, which sparkled and were translucent like jade. The corner of her mouth had a faintly mocking expression. His Highness Prince Jean and our young mistress are together. These words were correct but Cui Yu had not told the whole truth. Su Luo nodded her head. Nangong Luyun, when you saw that the little treehouse had been wiped out, was your heart able to feel guilt and remorse? Being you were unsure of whether I am dead or alive, were you worried? Why was it that the one that was looking for me is not you? So once you have your Jade Lake's fairy, do I no longer matter to you? If I think about it this way, then the vow you previously made to me and all that you said are really laughable. As expected. If ever she depended on a mountain for support, then the mountain would collapse. If she leaned on a person, the person would run away. She could only rely on herself. Su Luo's pair of eyes were like water, but she had an icy cold expression that was intent on hearing the truth. Talk, how many people did your Jade Lake's ferry send out to kill me? Since they were already dispatched, the Jade Lake's ferry wanted to completely eliminate her. It seemed like this time, she really was surrounded by perils. It was extremely dangerous. Su Luo didn't know what was wrong with her. Could it be because her character was lacking? It had only been half a day, yet she had already encountered 3 cases of being chased by groups trying to kill her. She felt as if she should personally visit a temple and burn a stick of incense, pay respect to Buddha, or do anything to try and get rid of this rotten fortune. She simply had the worst luck. However, Cui Yu's faces became unresponsive, and she turned her head away. Don't want to talk. Very good, extremely good. A sinister sneer appeared in Su Luo's eyes. Right now Su Luo's mood was really gloomy, and here was a person not afraid of death, delivering herself for Su Luo to vent on. This was really the only good thing going for her at the moment. Without as much as a hint of hesitation, her dagger directly chopped down. All my hand, Cui Yu could only see that her entire wrist had been cut off with blood pouring out and spraying madly everywhere. She hadn't even finished when Su Luo's dagger chopped down again. Cui Yu's other hand was also severed, blood similarly madly rushed forth. I'll talk. Cui Yu was in so much pain that she almost died. Her complexion was as pale as paper, and cold sweat was falling down like rain. Actually, you can still wait for a moment. Su Luo's smile was as friendly as a warm breeze, but in Cui Yu's eyes, she was like a demon from Azura's hell, with an expression full of a terrible sinister intent. Apart from me, there are 3 other people. Cui Yu was in so much agony that she could only grasp roughly for air. Her eyes unwaveringly glared at Su Luo, full of fierce, malicious curses. Every one of their strength is stronger than mine, and they definitely will avenge me. Really? Then let's just wait and see. Su Luo stood up, towering above her and disdainfully looked down at her. Upon the fact that you revealed everything. I'll give you a chance, finish yourself off. No, Cui Yu desperately shook her head, at the moment when she was really at death's door. She finally become aware that she really will forever depart from this world. Afterwards, there won't be any breaths, won't be able to smell the air, won't be able to open her eyes again, blue sky, white clouds, she won't be able to see anything anymore. If I was to do it, I'm afraid I won't be able to help but to slice off your flesh piece by piece from your body. Su Luo indifferently looked at her own hands, smilingly said. I have yet to kill a person, don't want to dirty my hands because of you. Cui Yu was very wrathful, but she thought about Su Luo's ruthless methods, so she closed her eyes and furiously flung herself headfirst to a nearby rock. Chapter 93, To Come Back from Death's Door. 6, bang, the sound resounded, Cui Yu's head cracked open. She immediately died and couldn't have been more dead. It was you who committed suicide, I certainly did not make a move to kill you. Su Luo smiled while showing off her snowy white teeth. After that, she quickly began to clean up any traces that may be left behind. Wasting no less than 1 hour, she had erased all traces. Then, she advanced deep into the mountains. She knew that the Jade Lake's ferry wanted to kill her, so she only had 3 possible roads she could take. One way was to avoid the Jade Lake's ferry and find Nangong Luyun. The Jade Lake's ferry wouldn't dare to kill her in front of Nangong Luyun, but this method had a high degree of difficulty. In addition, she really didn't want to see him right now. The second way was to hide deep within this mountainous ancient forest, making sure that the other side could never find her. As for the third way, it was to kill everyone that the Jade Lake's fairy had sent after her. However, that last option, with regards to the current Su Luo, was too unrealistic. The towering, majestic mountains extended endlessly into the distance. Su Luo continuously dove into the forests of the deep mountain. Along the way, she carefully erased any trace of her passing, hoping she would not be found by the other side. She walked for about 2 hours, when a sense of danger assaulted her mind. Su Luo now had a tingling feeling along her back. She knew, she was being followed by someone. Also, the person this time, like Cui Yu had said, had martial arts that were at a much higher level than Cui Yu's. Su Luo hid deep within the ancient trees, and coldly looked towards the front. There was a woman wearing a light yellow-colored slip over her garments. Her breath was stronger than Cui Yu's, so she was probably a third-ranked martial artist. Su Luo was able to kill Cui Yu because of her sneak attack, but this person was already at the third rank. This time, it would be difficult to handle. Su Luo blended herself into the night, as much as possible, reducing her presence. However, all of a sudden, she could only see this maiden called Huang smile coldly. Subsequently, she directly came at Su Luo with an attack. She had actually been discovered. The strength in that sword strike was not something Su Luo could block right now. Su Luo dropped to the ground and rolled away, evading that fatal attack. Right after, she lengthened her steps and dashed ahead. Su Luo knew that if she was to fight one-on-one, this person could easily and effortlessly knock her out. The current her could only evade and hide. Su Luo saw the creeper vine in the forest, and her heart rejoiced. She lifted up the creeper vine and entered a secret hidden cave. The cave was very narrow, with only a square meter of space. Su Luo's back pressed up against the cave's wall. She controlled her breathing and suppressed her heartbeat to its lowest speed, like a cold-blooded animal during hibernation. It could be sensed that she only had a trace of presence. Through the creeper vine, Su Luo's eyes narrowed into a slit. At the same time, her heart was full of wrath. Jade Lake's fairy, if you want a man, don't you know how to win him over by yourself? What kind of ability is it to kill an outsider like her? Su Luo clenched her fist firmly, a furious intent flashing through her eyes. She vowed to wait until her strength rose. She would absolutely balance this account and properly return the compliment. However, right now, Su Luo could only rage inside and endure it silently. However, her attempt to forbear was too late. Because her emotions had been too stirred up, therefore, her vitality rose too vigorously. Consequently, that Huang maiden was finally able to detect a thread of difference. Seeing that the sword was about to strike towards her with a killing intent, Su Luo rolled on the ground, rushing out and leaving the small cave. She managed to escape this time's extremely close and thrilling death chase. However, a good thing didn't last forever. Very quickly, halfway on the road, Su Luo again detected that she had been locked on by Huang. This indeed, was the soul of the deceased having not dispersed. 1. Su Luo hid herself in a swamp. Her entire body was buried in the muddy ooze. She was covered in dried-up decomposing tree leaves, with only a pair of eyes exposed at the surface. She stopped her breathing, and wished that this time she could escape. However, this Huang maiden stood at the edge of the swamp. There was an unkind fury on her face, like that of someone who had long endured, but was still unable to catch that person. 1. The soul of the deceased having not dispersed, idiom, figuratively meaning the influence still lingers on, the spirit, of some doctrine, is still alive. Chapter 94, To Come Back from Death's Door. 7. Every time Huang was close to catching Su Luo, the opponent's movements would resemble a mud fish and slip through her fingers. Su Luo took advantage of her every careless mistake to escape, causing Huang to become extremely frustrated and unhappy. Just like now, right when Huang was about to lock onto Su Luo, Su Luo's entire person once again seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Huang vented her anger by launching sword attacks at the swamp. The tip of her double-edged sword sparkled with golden lightning as it flipped endless pieces of mud into the sky. Within the sword tip, spirit strength accumulated. The light that came from the sword strike was strong enough to take a life. Whoosh! A band of golden rays flashed by Su Luo's right side, striking her right arm. Su Luo felt a sudden acute pain. It was so agonizing that cold sweat broke out on her face. At that instant, Su Luo was under the impression that her right arm had been severed. It took another 2 hours before Huang's deranged venting of her fury had finally ended. Su Luo clenched her teeth while crawling out of the swamp. Her right arm was drenched in blood, the intense pain almost made her pass out. The magnificent Jade Fairy, you did well. This hatred has been engraved into my heart. Su Luo dragged her exhausted body forward until she found a creek to wash clean her wound. At the same time, she also washed her clothes that were covered with mud. Due to excessive blood loss, Su Luo felt that her head was spinning, her vision was becoming blurry, and her body was about to faint. She inwardly cried about the hardships in her heart. Right now, she really could not run anymore. If things continued this way, sooner or later, she would be captured by Huang. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in her head, as Su Luo remembered that she had her own treasured space. Although there was nothing in the space, it still contained the spirit spring. This spirit spring was a sacred commodity that had the ability to heal. Su Luo cupped her hands, drew the water from her space, and drank. The spirit spring water was like ambrosial nectar, rich, mellow, and full-bodied. Its pure aroma enticed and beckoned. Su Luo's previous weak mental state became a lot stronger. Her thought processes recovered completely and she no longer felt dizzy. After drinking her fill, Su Luo again withdrew a handful of water and sprinkled it on her wounds. Although the wounds were not healed immediately, the bleeding slowly stopped. Su Luo released a sigh of relief. At long last, she had come back from death's door. She had survived. However, before Su Luo could complete her sigh of relief, she suddenly felt danger approaching from behind. Su Luo rolled on the ground and avoided a vicious sword strike. The attacker was not Huang but Nen Lu. She was among the 4 people that were chasing Su Luo with the intent to kill. Vile girl, so you were hiding here, causing your mother to search for you for a long time. Eat my sword. Without saying another word, Nen Lu directly thrust her sword at Su Luo. The long double-edged sword became numerous rays of light. In a manner of hiding the sky and covering the earth, it launched towards Su Luo. Momentarily, an unnatural gale which was not caused by the weather erupted. Su Luo simply could not deflect the attack, she could only rely on her speed to dodge. However, her body had suffered a severe injury and had also lost a large amount of blood, so she wasn't as nimble as before. Su Luo was too slow to dodge, so she was hit with a piercing blow by the double-edged sword. The sharp pain that exploded almost made her faint on the spot. The wound that she had with great difficulty stopped from bleeding, once again burst open. Overwhelming pain washed over her. Su Luo clenched her teeth. She bit her bottom lip so hard that blood began to seep out. Su Luo could not fall. If she fell down now, she would definitely die. In front of her was an overhanging cliff. The drop from the cliff was deep, so deep that you could not see the bottom. It was also surrounded by heavy fog. Su Luo's eyes flashed with relentless determination. Even if she were to die, she will pull the other person down with her. However, Su Luo did fall down. She weakly fell to the ground, motionless as if she had died. Her body lacked even the tiniest sign of life. A cold smile appeared in Nen Lu's eyes. She walked to Su Luo's body, crouched down, and sneered. "Little slut, you have the impertinence to seduce His Highness Prince Jean. Even if you die 100 times it won't be enough. Rest assured and go. His Highness Prince Jean will be well looked after by our young mistress. After saying this, she hoisted up Su Luo's corpse and quickly threw it over the cliff's edge. Big Sister Qin Ning had said before, destroy not only the corpse, but also the evidence. However, at this moment, misfortune unexpectedly occurred. 1. Hiding the sky and covering the earth, idiom, figuratively meaning earth-shattering, omnipresent, of universal importance. Chapter 95, To Search for Hidden Treasures. 1. When she hoisted up Su Luo's corpse, an ice-cold, cruel smile could be seen at the corner of Su Luo's mouth. She twisted her body around and grabbed onto Nen Lu's sleeves, placing her entire weight on Nen Lu's shoulders. Her body was hanging upside down, with her head facing the ground. That broken dagger ruthlessly stabbed towards Nen Lu's heart from her back. Ah! Nen Lu let out a wretched scream, the fury in her heart was at its peak. She endured the intense pain and used all her strength to throw Su Luo off the cliff. However, Su Luo was stuck to her body like gnocchi candy. 1. No matter what she did, she couldn't throw Su Luo off. At the same time, Su Luo unceasingly stabbed her with the dagger. In less than a second, countless numbers of lacerations appeared on Nen Lu's body. However, Nen Lu wouldn't let Su Luo have an easy time of it either. She finally sent a heavy palm strike towards Su Luo. The pit of Su Luo's stomach was hit by that palm. Su Luo only felt a metallic sweetness in her throat, and then a huge stream of blood wildly sprayed out. At this moment, both of them were at the edge of the cliff. The bitingly cold wind screamed through the mountains, blowing on the two bruised and battered people, who were on the verge of collapse. The sound of Nen Lu's grim laugh echoed, as she sent one foot kicking towards Su Luo. This kick contained all of her strength. She had already calculated that this kick was enough to send Su Luo down the cliff, as a way to destroy the body while erasing all the evidence. However, just at this critical juncture, Su Luo grabbed onto and tightly hugged Nen Lu's leg which was kicking her. Because of the effect of gravity, both of them fell off the cliff. While they were falling, Su Luo used her strength to keep pulling and twisting, until she was on top, while Nen Lu was beneath her. Nen Lu was so angry that she wanted to do the same by imitating Su Luo's actions, but Su Luo's foot heavily kicked her downwards. Nen Lu's heart was so enraged that she swore, if there was a next life, she would definitely dismember Su Luo's body and chop it into 10,000 pieces. But there wasn't enough time for her to think much more. Now, the two of them had already dropped close to the bottom of the abyss. Splash! Both of them fell into the water, the deafening sound of water being displaced resounded, like being shot out of a geyser, water flew high into the sky. At that moment, both of them completely lost consciousness. Both of their bodies were brutally pulled by the current of the creek, continuously colliding with obstructions in the water. Nobody knew where this water flowed to. Unaware of how much time had passed, Su Luo's eyelashes, which were thin as a cicada's wing, trembled slightly. She slowly opened her eyes, and saw a rock above her head. She now discovered that the illuminations in all directions were very dim, and that she had been washed ashore by the creek water. Su Luo found that her entire body was in pain. It was so agonizing, that it was as if her body had been torn into tiny little pieces. The pain was so great that she was almost numb. Su Luo fetched a handful of water from within her space, and with much difficulty, she drank it. After a long while, she was slowly able to recover. She staggeringly stood up, and suspiciously took measure of her surroundings. This place was a crescent-shaped cave. A cave that had been abandoned for many years. Su Luo was so weak that she could barely stand, but she clenched her teeth and stood up. She swayingly staggered towards the inside of the cave. She supported herself using the cave's wall. With great strain, she walked more than 100 meters into the cave, yet she still hadn't reached the end. This strip of dark tunnel was pitch black and gloomy, as if leading to a borderless underworld. Everything was covered in darkness. However, without knowing why, it seemed as if a mysterious power was beckoning to her. It continuously coaxed her to continue walking deeper inside. She roughly walked about another 300 meters. Su Luo kept breathing in mouthfuls of cold air. Where did this tunnel actually lead to? Could it be that there was no end to this path? She really didn't believe it. Su Luo's competitive heart was aroused. She dragged her exhausted body, step by step shuffling further into the cave. She walked a full 1,000 meters, when all of a sudden, her sharp ears heard the sound from the bubbling water of a creek. When Su Luo walked to the place where the sound was coming from, her eyes couldn't help but open wide, scanning the scene in front of her. At this moment, she thought her own eyes were seeing things. The dark tunnel ended in an unexpectedly large, circular space, which was no less than the size of a basketball court. This empty space appeared to be very spacious. At the center of this place was a purple furnace-shaped standing cauldron, too. Workbenches formed a circle surrounding the cauldron. Some crystal stones and medicinal herbs were sparsely arranged on the workbenches. One Yopi candy is a sticky, stretchy caramel-like candy usually cut into rectangles and covered in sesame seeds. Here is a Chinese site that shows how you can make it. 2. The Chinese character is Ding, an ancient Chinese standing cauldron used for cooking, serving and storage vessel. Smaller version of it was used to hold wine and food during religious rituals. The Ding can have 3 or 4 standing legs. See wiki link. Chapter 96, To Search for Hidden Treasures. 2. Not far from the workbenches, there was a bookshelf with a few books randomly placed on the shelves. However, this was not the cause of Su Luo's astonishment. What amazed her was that there were about 7 to 8 corpses lying in various positions surrounding the workbench. Every corpse was air-dried and withered, as if the owner had passed away a long time ago. It was very clear that these people had been in a very intense fight. Su Luo was in the midst of frowning when suddenly, she sensed danger behind her. Su Luo immediately dropped and rolled on the ground to dodge. Didn't know that your survival skills were so great. Even the fall couldn't kill you. Nanlu said as she leaned on the corner wall for support. Her face displayed a duplicitous and furtive smile, full of strong killing intent. In the beginning, Nanlu was only following orders to kill Su Luo when she attacked the other. However, at this moment, Nanlu was itching to dismember Su Luo into 10,000 tiny pieces for her own benefit. Aren't you also still alive? Su Luo's smile was as light as a cloud and gentle like the wind. Nevertheless, a trace of apprehension appeared in her heart. The opponent was a third-ranked martial artist, while she herself had no spiritual strength. They were both injured, but by observing Nanlu's attack a moment ago, Su Luo realized that Nanlu's injuries were much lighter than hers. Nanlu was about to seize this opportunity to kill Su Luo when suddenly, her line of sight turned towards the interior of the room. With just this one look, she was so amazed that her mouth fell open. Then, an ecstatic expression appeared on her face. Nanlu quickly walked into the room, full of excitement and with an incredulous expression. That looked at everything inside. She kept mumbling to herself. This can't be real, right? Could it actually be Zihua's medicinal cauldron? Is it really Zihua's medicinal cauldron? What is a Zihua's medicinal cauldron? Su Luo asked, full of curiosity. At this time, Nanlu already viewed Su Luo as a dead person, so she felt no need to conceal anything from her. Right now, Nanlu really needed to let out the ecstasy in her heart or else she would go mad from holding it in. I told you you were a good-for-nothing but you refused to accept it. You haven't even heard of Zihua's medicinal cauldron. Zihua's medicinal cauldron is a top-notch divine artifact pursued by all the apothecaries in the world. If they use this medicinal cauldron to refine medicine, then the rate of success will increase by 100-fold. Never mind, talking to you is simply like playing a lute to a cow. 1. You don't even know what an apothecary is, right? Confronted by Nenlu's belittling expression, Su Luo coldly laughed in her heart. Sorry to embarrass you, but this great one actually has a wood-fire duel system and was preparing to level up as an apothecary. At this moment, Nenlu looked at Zihua's medicinal cauldron in wonder. Her sword was emitting mysterious rays of light as she murmured to herself. It was said that during that time, Elder Zihua went into seclusion. Could it be that he finally died here? Elder Zihua? Su Luo again asked, who is he? Nenlu rolled her eyes. You haven't even heard of Elder Zihua? This renowned elder was the world's only grandmaster-level apothecary. Do you know how many famous families and noble clans under the heavens wanted to curry favor with this renowned elder? Yet you have actually never heard of this Elder Zihua. Your stupidity can't be cured. I really have nothing more to say to you. Su Luo knew that the continent's apothecaries were divided into levels: elementary apothecary, intermediate apothecary, advanced apothecary, elite apothecary, as well as grandmaster apothecary. It was extremely difficult to advance to the next apothecary level. However, apothecaries were rare, thus making every apothecary extremely precious. Su Manor's apothecary was only an elementary apothecary, but due to his existence, he was able to ensure that Su Manor did not topple for the past few decades. She never expected that the Elder Zihua was the legendary rumored Grandmaster Apothecary. It was indeed hard to imagine. Wow! Nanlu, who was lingering in front of the bookshelf ahead, suddenly loudly shrieked, "Primeval pill recipes!" Unexpectedly, obscure pill recipes, too, is also here. Oh heavens! Jackpot, I really hit the jackpot. Obscure pill recipes was Elder Zihua's personal notes. It was a written record of his life's knowledge and experience regarding medicinal recipes. Inside, it also had a lot of primeval pill recipes which had not been passed on and were thought to be lost for eternity. Chapter 97, To Search for Hidden Treasures, 3, including Zihua's medicinal cauldron. These were all treasures that apothecaries would yearn for in their dreams. Countless experts on the continent have sought this obscure pill recipes in order to curry favors with apothecaries. However, after having flipped over the entire continent in their search, no one was able to find it. Yet, she would never have imagined that in her hunt for Su Luo she had unexpectedly lucked out. She found obscure pill recipes, and even Zihua's medicinal cauldron. At this moment, Nanlu almost went mad with joy. She trembled with jubilation and extreme excitement. She almost jumped up for joy in her elation. She reached out for the obscure pill recipes, but very quickly she withdrew her hand. She didn't dare, she was afraid of death. This was because the corpses lying haphazardly on the floor told her that Elder Zihua was definitely a poison expert. His belongings definitely could not be encroached upon by just anyone. You, come here. Nanlu raised her long sword to Su Luo's neck, coldly glaring at her as if looking at a dead man. You want to kill me to silence me? Su Luo lifted the corner of her lips in a slight smile that was not truly a smile. Kill you to silence you? Nanlu laughed out loud. I definitely will kill you to silence you. Otherwise, if even half a word of what happened here were to spread from your lips, great trouble will befall our Jade Lake Palace. Therefore, you must die. Really? Su Luo faintly smiled. Just great, she too had a similar notion. But right now, you can't die yet. Nanlu used the long sword to threaten Su Luo and bellowed, bring that obscure pill recipes over here. Nanlu wanted to appropriate everything here for herself, but she would not even dare to touch them. Obviously, she was being used as a lab rat. Su Luo felt a chill flashed across her heart, her gaze fell upon the corpses on the floor, one had a dagger stabbed into it. Icy cold light reflected off the dagger. Fine. Su Luo did not refuse. She walked over step by step, with a harmless smile on her face. Quickly pick it up. Nen Lu coldly commanded. She wanted to use Su Luo to test for poison, to see if this obscure pill recipes had any poison on it. Right now, at this crucial moment, she must not die. Discovering Elder Zihua's cave, what other achievement could compare to it? Having this achievement, in the future, even Qing Ning that bitch, would be beneath her. Perhaps, she could take those things and escape to faraway places. This also was not a bad idea, such thoughts quickly flashed through Nen Lu's mind. Su Luo watched Nen Lu's constantly changing expressions, and a hint of sneer appeared in her eyes. An inexperienced naive idiot. But the expression on Su Luo's face remained unchanged, and when her hand touched the book, she silently mouthed, "Collect." Suddenly, in an instant, the book vanished from the bookshelf. What happened? Where's the book? Su Luo pretended to be surprised, and with an expression of having lost her head out of fear, she screamed out loud. Nen Lu's whole face had a look of utter disbelief. She had kept a very close eye on it just now. Her line of sight never once leaving Su Luo's hand, yet she could only helplessly watch as that book, in an instant, vanished without a trace. What actually happened? The book was fine, how could it just disappear? This time, I must have seen a ghost. Nen Lu could confirm that during such a short time, Su Luo had no chance to pull off any tricks. It was a pity that no matter how much she speculates, she could never have guessed that Su Luo was unexpectedly a space mage, with her body carrying a portable space. That was why, Nen Lu's first reaction was to leap to the bookshelf and search for it continuously. At this time, Su Luo was bending over pretending to search for it, but she furtively pulled out the dagger. Seeing that Nen Lu's whole attention was focused on searching through the primeval pill recipes, the corner of Su Luo's mouth lifted into an ice-cold, unrestrained, demonic and sly smile. No sooner said than done. Chapter 98, To Search for Hidden Treasures, 4, with a barely perceivable movement of Su Luo's hand, that dagger had already vanished into her sleeves. All of Nen Lu's attention was focused on finding obscure pill recipes, so she did not notice Su Luo's covert movements. Where did it go? Why can't find it? Su Luo questioned with a puzzled look upon her face, firmly gripping the dagger in her sleeves as she stealthily approached Nen Lu. Was it because Nen Lu frowned? She was about to turn around when she noticed a shadow rapidly coming towards her. Nen Lu subconsciously tried to block the attack with her hand, tragically causing her right hand to be severed neatly at the wrist. The place of the cut was flat and smooth. Immediately, blood wildly gushed out from the open wound as if it wasn't vital to Nen Lu's life. Only after seeing the severed hand that had fallen on the ground did Nen Lu finally realize what had happened. She screamed out loud in agony. Su Luo was equally unsatisfied with this result. Originally, Su Luo had a well-thought-out plan, directly stabbed Nen Lu's heart through her back. With Su Luo's speed and accuracy, it wouldn't be possible for Nen Lu to escape death. Still, who would have known that at the last moment Nen Lu would manage to retain her life? If Nen Lu did an about-face and ran right now, she would merely lose a hand but would preserve her life. It's a pity that Nen Lu was so blinded by her hatred of Su Luo at the moment, so she was itching to make mincemeat out of Su Luo to appease the hatred in her heart. Consequently, Nen Lu didn't even take the time to think before picking up the long sword that had fallen with her dismembered hand while ignoring the pain she felt. She directly charged at Su Luo with a murderous strike. A cold smirk flashed across Su Luo's eyes. She took out a book from her space and tossed it toward Nen Lu with a smile on her face. Catch it. Don't lose it again. Obscure pill recipes. Nen Lu's eyes opened wide. She stared with stunned amazement at the obscure pill recipes that appeared in Su Luo's hand from out of nowhere. Her attention was momentarily distracted. However, this short split-second of carelessness was enough for Su Luo. Immediately after she threw the obscure pill recipes in Nenlu's direction, Su Luo had quickly shifted her body and arrived at Nenlu's back like a ghost. While Nenlu's attention was momentarily distracted, like a demon from hell, Su Luo raised the new dagger she had picked up and slashed Nenlu's neck immediately. Blood gushed forth. Nenlu was staring blankly at the obscure pill recipes in her hand. Her nails had whitened because she was ready to explode with rage. However, Nenlu could only watch the unstoppable blood pour out of her neck. She glared at Su Luo with an expression of having suddenly realized something. Space. Mage. Afterwards, with an unreconciled expression, Nenlu fell backwards. Her eyes were wide open with malevolence. Even in death, they wouldn't close due to residual resentment. Su Luo grabbed the obscure pill recipes from Nenlu's clenched fingers, patted off the dust, and was all smiles as she said. Correct, this young lady is a space mage. It's a pity you only realized it as you were dying. It was too late. At this moment, Su Luo was very thankful for her space. In the beginning, she had felt that it was weak. Now, she had slowly discovered its exceptional qualities. After eliminating Nenlu, Su Luo started to look around for treasure. She stood in front of the bookshelf. The shelves were full of advanced pharmacology books, many of which Su Luo couldn't comprehend. However, that didn't matter. She will take all the books back and slowly study them. Su Luo did not grab the books one by one. Instead, she placed the entire bookshelf into her space. Afterwards, Su Luo held her chin and started to circle around Zihua's medicinal cauldron. While circling, she took its measure by looking it up and down. She pondered this medicinal cauldron was nothing special, but why was it so heavy? Yes, it was definitely quite heavy. Su Luo had already tested its weight a moment ago. Chapter 99, To Search for Hidden Treasures. 5. Su Luo wanted to shift the medicinal cauldron, but found that no matter how much strength she used, it wouldn't budge. It was as if the thing was rooted to the ground. If others wanted to take away the medicinal cauldron, it would be extremely difficult. Who knew Su Luo would have the greatest treasure for traveling that others would kill for on her body? Su Luo placed her hand on the edge of the medicinal cauldron and murmured, "Collect." Thus, Zihua's medicinal cauldron, weighing over 5,000 kilograms, vanished on the spot. Su Luo extended her senses into her space and became somewhat worried. She discovered that after circling the cave and taking everything, that little 10 square meters of space had been stuffed full, with barely any space left for her to stand in it. How could she do this? That corner still had a pile of black rocks. She had neither an idea of what it was nor its purpose. Since she couldn't pack it, then she would just abandon it. She would wait until she was fated to come back here and collect it in the future, Su Luo thought sadly. Hence, she bent over to pick up a few pieces, planning to find someone to analyze it. After all, it was left behind by Elder Zihua, something left behind by him. How could it be simple? After throwing exactly 3 rocks into her space, all of a sudden, Su Luo felt a wave of dizziness. It was a pain that she couldn't make heads or tails of it, and that almost knocked her off her feet. But this kind of stinging pain left as quickly as it came, it was gone in the blink of an eye. At this moment, Su Luo checked her space, and suddenly, her mouth formed an O shape. Unexpectedly, this was also possible. Su Luo discovered that her space had grown bigger, even though the change was not obvious. However, at the corner her space, it had actually grown by square meter. This kind of discovery made Su Luo ecstatic. The space can actually get larger. Su Luo's gaze fell upon the pile of round black stones. Just now, she had put in the medicinal cauldron, books and other materials, and yet the space did not change. However, after putting in those 3 black little stones, her space changed. Could it be that these rocks were able to increase the size of her space? Whether it was true or not, she could find out by trying again. Su Luo picked up a black rock and threw it in, 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. Whoosh! Suddenly, Su Luo felt her head started to ache. It hurt so much that she broke out in cold sweat. But after she opened her eyes, she found that her space had indeed grown bigger by another square meter. It turned out to be true. This discovery allowed Su Luo to put her heart at ease. Without hesitation, she promptly swept up the remaining 10 or so stones from the ground into her space, sweeping the floor clean. Hence, her space had widened again by another 5 square meters. Su Luo was secretly delighted. If there was an opportunity, she would go search for more of these black stones. At this moment, Su Luo had yet to find out what kind of energy actually resided in these black rocks, and how advantageous they would be to her cultivation in the future. However, just as Su Luo was about to leave, she realized that another person was at the entrance. That person was hugging her sword and reclining against the entrance, lips in a sneer, with eyes as cold as a viper unblinkingly staring at her. Su Luo felt her heart jump, silently bemoaning trouble. Just now, she had recklessly swept up all those treasures in the room. Had it possibly been witnessed by her opponent? Since Su Luo could not sense the other's presence when she arrived, this already proved that that person's martial skills were a lot better than hers. Su Luo, your cheap life still has such great luck in surviving. Huang held her double-edged sword, sneering non-stop as she approached Su Luo. Ever since Huang had lost Su Luo's trail, she had continuously searched. Later, she found traces of a fight at the edge of a cliff. Without another word, she shimmied down the creeper vine and searched en route. Unexpectedly, she had discovered this cave that was a completely different world. However, the most important discovery was of Su Luo's body. Huang would never have imagined that the legendary good-for-nothing was actually a space mage that was considered to be extinct on the continent. 1. A Chinese gene equals 0. 5 kg or 1 pounds. Here the author stated 10,000 gene, which then equals 5,000 kg. We will be converting all measurements to the International System of Units. Chapter 100, In Enemy Hands, 1. Moreover, Su Luo's space wasn't small either. Although apothecaries are rare, weighed against the almost extinct space mages, how could they even compare? If the matter of a space mage appearing was to spread, in all likelihood, wouldn't the entire continent be stirred up by this? Unbelievable. Huang really couldn't have imagined it. This vile girl was actually a space mage. Originally, she wanted to kill Su Luo, but now she couldn't. She believed that the young mistress would be overjoyed to give this slut to the venerable master as an offering. After they had placed Su Luo's mind under their control, she could only helplessly throw her life away in service to the Jade Lake Palace. The more Huang thought about it, the more gleeful she became. Her smile had a sinister measuring look as she step by step walked towards Su Luo. Her hand swung the long sword, aiming its sharp tip straight at Su Luo. Little slut, let's see where you can run to now. Su Luo's thoughts were indeed currently suppressed to the point that she felt she was about to die. During the 5,000-kilometer-long march, 1, she had overcome so much and walked so long, 2. Just when she saw the end of the road, at this final juncture, she was intercepted by the enemy forces. This was truly the story of the praying mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the black-naped oriole bird behind. Moreover, she was the unfortunate hateful praying mantis. Nangong Luyun had exhorted and warned Su Luo a great number of times before to be cautious and prudent. She must not let the matter of her being a space mage be revealed. Otherwise, her life would be in constant danger. Now, Su Luo's greatest hidden trump card had been discovered by the Jade Lake Fairy's maid, if this was to leak out. Su Luo's eyes narrowed slightly. A homicidal determination to obliterate all evidence of her unwitting disclosure appeared in Su Luo's heart. However, her expression remained calm and collected. Icy rays from the depths of Su Luo's eyes shot a quick glance at Huang. What if I don't go with you? Do you really think you have the leeway to choose? Huang condescendingly said while casting disparaging glances at Su Luo. Huang's current situation was like the venerable queen up high while Su Luo was merely an ant that she could easily trample on. Su Luo was just a lowly ant that completely lacked the strength to fight back. But, when Huang's vision landed on Nenlu's body that was on the ground with eyes full of unresolved resentment staring sightlessly in death, a trace of shock passed through her eyes. Nenlu had actually been killed. She and Nenlu had grown up together. They had practiced martial arts together, so Huang was very familiar with Nenlu's martial arts abilities and knew it was on par with hers. Never in a million years could she have imagined that Nenlu would die under the hands of the good-for-nothing Su Luo. Nenlu really had died with unresolved grievances. Looks like I really underestimated you, slut. Huang cast sidelong glances at Su Luo, gnashing her teeth as her rage burst forth. Huang was itching to finish off Su Luo with one sword strike. Regrettably, she could not kill Su Luo now. Su Luo was this continent's almost extinct space mage. Furthermore, she was also a space mage that did not have any power to protect herself. Huang secretly speculated that if she was to take Su Luo to an auction house and sell her, on the basis of this little slut's innate gift and appearance, shouldn't she be able to sell for an unprecedented sky-high price? It would indeed be a fortune that could tempt a person's heart. Su Luo examined Huang's constantly changing sinister expressions and also turned her head to look at the corpse of the fallen Nenlu. A bitter look appeared in Su Luo's eyes. Her secret having been discovered was disastrous. Due to this, Huang would certainly increase her vigilance. Su Luo's small tricks from before could not be used again. With a bitter smile on her face, Su Luo raised both of her hands in surrender. Huang had learned a lesson from Nenlu's mistake and as a result had become very cautious. Huang took out a dark red blood-colored rope and tied both of Su Luo's hands behind her back. Huang had bound Su Luo so tightly that the joint looked seamless. Behave. Don't even think about escaping. Huang warned with a stern voice. Su Luo only made a slight movement. When Huang's icy-cold long sword sliced at her neck, a thin thread of blood slowly seeped out of the cut. Su Luo knew that if she resisted, on account of having killed two of the opponent's sister-in-arms, Huang would probably without a second thought either break or cut off her arms and legs. 5,000-kilometer long march written in Chinese was 10,000 li, 2 li equals 1 kilometer. This is a reference to the historical one made by the eventual communist leader Mao Zedong in October of 1934. Before World War II, China had a civil war/internal struggle for power between the Chinese National Party led by Chiang Kai-shek and the Chinese Red Army of the Communist Party. Chiang Kai-shek was about to eliminate the Red Army at Jiangxi when Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai led the Long March to escape the encirclement. The march was a bitter one that lasted a year with only 10% of the original troops surviving till the end. 2. The Chinese characters stated 25,000 li equals 125,000 kilometers. I took the figurative meaning here because the Long March was only 9,000 kilometers. Chapter 101, In Enemy Hands. 2. She definitely didn't want that kind of tragedy to occur to her own body. Since that was the case, all she could do was to wait and see. She was pushed to the front by Huang. While walking slowly, Su Luo's thought process was like electricity. Plan after plan rapidly went through her head, as she thoroughly searched for a way to escape her predicament. She struggled to break free of the ropes that bound her hands behind her back, but sadly found that the red rope actually became even tighter. The rope tightened so much that it practically cut into her flesh. Su Luo sucked in a cold breath and immediately abandoned this method. Tch, Huang scoffed, you think it's just an ordinary rope? Truly laughable. That is the restraining spirit rope. Someone who has no spiritual power actually wants to force it open. Dream on. Spirit strength, was it? After her sealed space had been opened, Su Luo was no longer that good for nothing without a bit of spirit power. However, Huang once again opened her mouth and interrupted Su Luo's sweet dreams. Even if you have spirit strength, without knowing the method, then you are only trying to no avail. Su Luo suddenly became frustrated. Alright, this method could also not be used. While walking, Su Luo pretended to trip over her own feet and fell to the ground, with her back against the wall. In an instant, she pulled out the new dagger from her space to cut the rope. To her displeasure, she discovered that the rope couldn't be cut. Okay then, she had to think of other ways. Huang with a sneer, looked at her, stop trying, you can't escape. Obediently come with me to the Jade Lake Palace. Even though you know that I'm a space mage, you still use this method to invite me. You're not afraid that I'll blacken your name in front of your master. Su Luo tried to use words to divert her attention. Blacken my name? You really think that you're a notable person? Huang laughed mockingly, casting a sidelong glance at Su Luo, with a face full of disdain. Could it be that you don't know that there is a magical technique called control intentions? It can directly control the human mind, making people into walking corpses. Do you really think that after you arrive at the Jade Lake Palace, you are able to choose? Control intentions. Like walking corpses. Su Luo's heart was palpitating with fear. On the surface, Su Luo kept a wronged and lonely expression, but in her heart, she was secretly coming up with ideas. This Jade Lake's fairy's maid must be killed before she meets up with the Jade Lake's fairy. Su Luo absolutely could not let Huang leak out her secret, or else her life in the future would not be peaceful. They eventually reached the end of the long secluded tunnel, and they had already walked past the long, winding underground river. Although Su Luo had racked her brain, she still had not thought of an escape plan. She could not help but be secretly anxious. Now, speaking of the Jade Lake Fairy's side. At the side of Nangong Luyun, there currently stood the figure of a tall man dressed in black clothing. His entire body was wrapped in a black robe. He was standing rigidly straight, giving people a cold and harsh kind of feeling. Nangong Luyun received him. His gaze was devilishly charming and ruthless, revealing an ice-cold majestic light. Are they all present? Yes. The black-clothed man was very respectful. 3,000 members of the Tiger Wolf Regiment have all been gathered, awaiting your Highness's command. Search the Sunset Mountain Range with full force, you must find her. Nangong Luyun's face was a bit pale. Underneath his seemingly unperturbed eyes, was concealed a hawk-like penetrating sharp edge. His body was covered in a solemn and murderous aura. If you can't find her, then there's no need to return to this king. Yes, sir. The black-clothed man's straight and tall body bent down in a bow. He paid his respects and then turned around. He lifted his hands. Immediately, 3,000 people, shrouded in black robes, split into groups of 10, scattering in all directions to search. Standing nearby, the Jade Lake's fairy had her fists clenched, looking at Nangong Luyun once again speaking his desires. Her serene and undisturbed face had a trace of fury that was difficult to conceal. She never would have thought that Nangong Luyun would actually send the Tiger Wolf Regiment into the Sunset Mountain Range. Chapter 102, In Enemy Hands. 3, Others would not know, but she knew. The lowest level in the Tiger Wolf Regiment was at the 3rd rank. Their average strength was at 4th rank. With such a strong team entering the forest, she hoped that Qin Ning had already killed that slut and destroyed both the corpse and the evidence. Otherwise, this affair would become problematic. Even more infuriating to the Jade Lake Ferry was that this Tiger Wolf regiment had been secretly trained with painstaking effort, personally by Nangong Luyun. These were his secret troops and one of his greatest trump cards. She had never thought that Nangong Luyun, because of Su Luo, would reveal these troops. This spoke volumes of Su Luo's position in his heart. This discovery almost made Jade Lake Ferry grind her teeth to dust. Third senior brother, is there a need to launch such a large campaign? Maybe Qin Ning has already found Su Luo. After all, the Tiger Wolf Regiment is formed from 5 years of your blood and sweat. Jade Lake Ferry had a perfect smile, similar to a warm summer breeze. Nangong Liuyun's pair of beautiful eyes were bright as stars, his face pallid yet resolute. If the Tiger Wolf Regiment can be exchanged for Luo girl's safety. Don't mention one troop, even if it's all of them in the regiment, why would I be unwilling to part with them? As long as his Luo girl was safe, regardless of the price, he would pay it. A malicious expression flashed across Jade Lake Ferry's eyes. She was only nearly able to continue maintaining her gently smiling face, except for a slight stiffening at the corners of her lips. However, Nangong Luyun was no longer looking at her, he had closed his eyes and started to heal his injuries through cultivation. He had to quickly recover his strength, his Luo girl was still waiting for him. Speaking of Su Luo's side, she still did not know that Nangong Luyun had already sent men out searching for her. Being escorted by Huang like a criminal, Su Luo did her best to stall for time en route, but eventually, she still needed to face the inevitable conclusion. Seeing that they would be reaching that 1,000-year-old ancient tree in another hour, Su Luo's heart grew extremely anxious. She guessed that the Jade Lake Ferry would be at that 1,000-year-old ancient tree. If Su Luo waited until she was in the Jade Lake Ferry's grasp, the situation she faced would be far different from the present. By then, it would be even harder to escape. Su Luo's heart was secretly worried. Suddenly, just past the mountain peak, Huang's footsteps stopped. Her eyes coldly gazed at Su Luo, sneering, "Damnable girl, with your eyes circling around, still thinking to escape." Su Luo smiled sweetly and bluntly replied, "Haven't you heard it before? Fugitives who don't want to run aren't good fugitives." "Oh. Then you must be really disappointed." Huang raised the back of her blade and gestured at herself. "What are you going to do?" Su Luo's heart had a faint sense of dread. "You're not thinking about alarming everyone by shouting when we are near the camp, with the notion of attracting His Highness Prince Jin's attention, right? Say, how can I possibly give you such a chance?" Huang laughed treacherously. "So Miss Su, I will just have to work a little harder and carry you back." "Hey, I'm very heavy." Su Luo panicked. "No problem, I can carry you." Huang laughed shadily with a measuring look. With her words barely finished, Huang struck without warning towards the back of Su Luo's neck with the blunt side of her blade. If she were to be knocked out, she would really become fish meat on the chopping board, to be taken advantage of. Su Luo started to panic in her anxiety, but she could not come up with any solution. Presently, both her hands were bound by a red rope made of an unknown material, with the slightest movement causing it to constrict even tighter. By now, it had already cut into her flesh. If she moved again, it would probably slice off her hand. Extreme anxiety filled Su Luo's heart, yet there was nothing she could do. However, the goddess of fortune had always stood on Su Luo's side. Even though she let Su Luo experience numerous catastrophes, even being hunted down by countless people, she would always deliver a pleasant surprise at the very last moment. Just like right now. Chapter 103, Shaken to the Core, 1. Just at the crucial moment when Huang's sword was about to cut into Su Luo's back, suddenly, the vast silhouette of a divine beast emerged from behind Huang. Abruptly, a black whirlwind arrived. Immediately, the sandstorm left pebbles in its path, and dust covered the sky. A desolate and harsh aura rapidly spread in all directions, even the night had gained a savage, bloody atmosphere. A familiar omen, an ominous premonition, Su Luo turned around and ran. You still want to run? Huang let out a cold laugh, raising the sword and stabbed towards Su Luo's back. Su Luo's heart was extremely anxious. Huang was enough trouble, why had the venerable divine dragon also came back to join the action? Didn't she and her treasured son already return home? This situation was really that when it rains, it pours. All the misfortune had been encountered by her. Su Luo felt her heart crying out that it was unfair. Huang's sword fiercely struck out, however, the moment it came within 12 centimeters, of Su Luo, it stopped. The sword tip sat there frozen in midair, unable to advance even another centimeter forward. Moreover, in this life, Huang would never be able to advance forward a single centimeter more. It was because at this moment, her body seemed to be held in place. Her entire body was stiff as iron, standing there like an ice sculpture. Her jaw could not stop shuddering, cold sweat pouring down her forehead. She seemed to be enduring a great deal of pain. Suddenly only the sound of a loud boom could be heard. Su Luo used all her strength to throw her entire body forward, protecting her head and firmly lying on her stomach on the ground. It was only after the noise had ended that she had unsteadily stood up and looked back. With this one look, even she, who had seen countless bloody scenes, could not help but be speechless. Huang's entire body had exploded. Her limbs were scattered all around, and blood was splattered all over the place. The flesh on her body was charred to a crisp, even her skeleton had almost turned into powder. The ground was drenched in blood, marked with smears of guts and gore. This was a scene that could make anyone seeing it to throw up. Su Luo turned around and wanted to run, but the divine dragon had already appeared in front of her. Facing the divine dragon's pair of ice-cold eyes that were like an ancient abyss, Su Luo's heart involuntarily trembled. A chill that she had never felt before slowly rose from the soles of her feet to the rest of her body, to her limbs and through her bones. She even felt that her back was trembling. Just now, Huang's body exploding was clearly the divine dragon's handiwork. It only had to wave a claw, and Huang had exploded tragically, not even leaving behind a skeleton. Thinking about how from the start she had kidnapped its treasured son, Su Luo felt her forehead covered with cold sweat. All of a sudden, the enormous divine dragon in front of her changed shape. Before Su Luo's eyes, unexpectedly appeared the uttermost beautiful and handsomest man. A head of silvery, snow-white hair that poured down in torrents, lightly and wantonly dancing in the wind. It curved lovingly and was inseparable from that beautiful face, poetic and picturesque like a painting. A noble and stern face, with an expression clearly written in 4 characters, I alone am supreme. This person, could this be the venerable divine dragon that was chasing her and trying to kill her earlier? Actually, it was not a dragon mother, but a dragon father. Su Luo felt as if her throat was being choked, unable to say a word. Insignificant human. The venerable divine dragon's phoenix eyes narrowed, a murderous aura flashed from the depth of his eyes. Su Luo had all along kept a close watch on the eyes of the venerable divine dragon. Upon seeing the murderous intent, without having to think, she immediately dropped down in a protective posture and rolled into a big hole beside her. 1 CUN equals 3. 715 centimeters or 1.46 inches. It measures the width of a person's thumb at the knuckle. Here the author used 3 CUN, so about 12 centimeters. Chapter 104 Shaken to the core. 2, surrounded by deafening noise, Su Luo felt a murderous air sailing over her head in passing. Half of her head peeked out from within the hole. Su Luo was astonished when her eyes met with the venerable divine dragon's icy cold eyes. After one deadly attack by him, she was miraculously still alive. The venerable divine dragon frowned in displeasure. Shameless human, you dare to rob me of my son. Since the silly little dragon was not around, with a wave of the venerable divine dragon's hand, her life would end. Su Luo glanced at what little remained of Huang's body. She nervously swallowed and changed her expression to a flattering smile. Her starry eyes looked at the divine beast, silently made a solemn vow, and clenched her fist. "Your venerable divine dragon, sir." That was a misunderstanding, a complete misunderstanding. It was absolutely not what you think. I certainly had no intention of kidnapping the little dragon from your eminence. Su Luo was determined to never divulge the truth about what happened. The consequences of admitting her guilt came down to one word: death. The highest level of deceit is not to fool another, but to fool even yourself. Su Luo made a fist. She was going to lie at a level approaching the celestial realm. The venerable divine dragon lowered his eyes, sweeping her with a look of disdain. "I'll give you a chance to explain." The next few words would determine whether she would live or die. She hurriedly inverted right from wrong in her mind and began to speak. In summary, the story was that in order to let the divine dragon concentrate on defeating the phoenix, she had taken away the little divine dragon to protect him. Finally, Su Luo said wholeheartedly, "In the end, the little divine dragon was returned to you without a single hair harmed on his head." The venerable divine dragon's cold eyes were filled with deadly stillness. He disdainfully glanced at Su Luo. "Despicable human, you dared to make an equal contract with my son." Divine dragons were very distinguished while despicable humans were insignificant, yet both sides had entered into a contract of equals. How could the venerable divine dragon accept this? At this time, the venerable divine dragon had one hand behind his back. From within his sleeve, something small began to move. A small provocative head poked out as if desiring to get out. However, with just a pat by the venerable divine dragon, it became confused and disoriented, thus tumbling back into the sleeve. Su Luo began to cry inside her heart. If she said that it was the little divine dragon who had initiated the contract, she speculated that the venerable divine dragon would definitely kill her with one slap. However, the venerable divine dragon might not know all of the facts of the matter. Su Luo wiped her sweat. She could only try to divert the venerable divine dragon's attention. Su Luo pointed to Huang's mutilated body with a look of indignation. "The venerable divine dragon. When this shameless disciple saw me holding the little dragon before, she tried to force me to surrender the little dragon. She tied me up, the results of which you can clearly see. When I told her that the little divine dragon had to be returned to you, she attempted to kill me to vent her anger. Fortunately, we encountered you, the venerable divine dragon. Your eminence descended like the immortal god of justice. Your prestige and might are as vast as the oceans, your mighty dragon appearance is formidable. The venerable divine dragon had the kindness to save me. I will engrave it into my heart. Even if I were to die 10,000 times, I won't speak of this." The venerable divine dragon let out a humph sound, lifted his chin, and nodded his brows. Graceful words, definitely the flowery speech of humans. Su Luo silently thought, "You knew that the words were elegant but insincere, yet weren't you very pleased to hear it?" The venerable divine dragon looked at the shattered pieces of the corpse and also looked at Su Luo's thin and weak body. His brows once again wrinkled. "Incapable human, even such a tiny ant dared to take unfair advantage of you." "Okay," Su Luo conceded. This venerable divine dragon was very literate and accomplished, every word was full of condescending sarcasm. Despicable human, shameless human, incapable human, XX human, the space before human could be filled with a million derogatory words according to his whim. It actually should not be too surprising. Confronting the human race, the dragon race had a natural superiority complex. The dragon population grew very slowly. However, each baby dragon that was born had outstanding innate talent. Even if they did not cultivate while maturing and just spent time eating and sleeping, they can still stand shoulder to shoulder with the strongest humans. However, the ant that the venerable divine dragon referred to was Huang, right? Su Luo defended herself, that was because earlier my spiritual power was sealed. Of course I wouldn't be able to beat her. Once I've learned some magical techniques, naturally I will be far better than her. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.